Assassin's Creed. We all know it, we all love it, and it's a series that's been a powerhouse in the gaming community since about 2007. Over the years, Assassin's Creed has come under a lot of fire, especially when it first shifted to an open world RPG style formula in about 2017. With a lot of people complaining, rightfully so, that the Ubisoft formula of game design was becoming bland, boring, and repetitive in a lot of their open world titles. With the games, while looking beautiful in most cases, had very little substance to actually make them look enjoyable. No, that's actually completely wrong. With the games, while looking beautiful in most cases, had very little substance to them to actually make them enjoyable. So that brings us to our newest entry of the series, Assassin's Creed Shadows. Released in March of this year, Shadows already had a huge spotlight on because the last two entries of the series, Odyssey and Mirage. Definitely not forgetting one. The last few entries have been underwhelming to a lot of fans of the series, citing that these new games just don't have the same DNA as the old ones did. And that personally got me thinking, was there any truth to these criticisms? Were the old games in formula that much better than the newer ones? So obviously there was only one way to test this. I decided to replay Assassin's Creed and get 100% synchronization. Sorry, let me be specific. I decided to replay the entire Assassin's Creed series at 100% synchronization to see if it's as good as everyone says it is. Also, the entire franchise collection was on sale on Steam, so really it's their fault. So, in order to complete each game at 100% synchronization and rank them all accordingly, I gave myself some ground rules. I would have to play each game and any available DLC at 100% synchronization before I could move on to the next one. Pretty simple. 100% synchronization for each game would count towards that game's definition. For example, in Assassin's Creed Rogue, renovations count towards 100% completion, but not in Assassin's Creed Revelations. Obviously, in the newer Assassin's Creed games, there's no actual synchronization target, so 100% completion will count as every quest completed, every zone cleared, and every legendary item obtained. Oh, also for every game that has a home-based mechanic, I'm going to be requiring myself to fully upgrade that homestead. So in Assassin's Creed 2, it's going to be a Monteriggioni, and Assassin's Creed 3, it'll be the homestead, etc. Also, I will be tracking how long it takes me to complete each game. And of course, after each game, I'm going to be placing them on tier lists, because that is kind of the whole point of this entire thing anyways. So another thing to know for all my Creed heads out there is that there are 4 main eras of Assassin's Creed games. And I've never actually seen the games categorized in this way or anything like that, but it kind of showcases how each generation of the Assassin's Creed series defines free-running, base combat, and traversal all differently. The first era I like to call the OG era, even though it's just the Ezio trilogy in the first game, so really can just be called the Ezio era, but, you know. Then you have what I like to call the Sailing era, which has Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag, Freedom Cry, and Rogue, which all have a main focus of traversal on your boat. Sorry, ship. So I mean, in this way, it just makes sense to call it the Sailing era. Then you have what I like to call the City era. The City era consists of Unity and Syndicate, which focus on Paris and London respectively. And then we finally come to the Open World era, which consists of Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, and Shadows. And as I said earlier, I've never actually seen the games grouped this way by anyone, but it does make it a little bit easier to compare them, because instead of doing a direct one-to-one comparison to each game, you can also compare them to each other for each era. Oh, right, and there's also Liberation, just kind of there. Fuck it, put it in the PS Vita era. No one played the Vita anyways, but you know. Anyways, I've been wasting enough of our time, so let's just jump right into it. The backstory of Altair, and relearning the ways of the Creed, is a really interesting way to introduce people to the Brotherhood of the Assassins and show the growth of Altair as he has to remember what being an assassin means. The story of Altair was also much more interesting than anticipated, with some of the assassination missions having twists I didn't see coming, which kept me much more invested than expected. What I also didn't see coming is everyone having a somewhat Arabic-sounding voice besides Altair.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Understand these words. It matters not how we complete our task, only that it's done.
But this is not the way
My way is better.
I really think the mission design in this game is unique, and investigating your objectives using pickpocketing, eavesdropping, and extracting information from targets is a great idea. And I almost wish they used this approach more in the games following it, because it keeps the game a little bit more fast-paced for this style of planning your attack on your target. However, this mission style also has its drawbacks, as it does not really give that much depth into learning your enemies personally. The Borgia family versus Ezio in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood really helped the story along, whereas in this game you do not really have your sights set on a main antagonist. The main story, however, was interesting, with a really surprising twist that made Al-Mualim much more compelling, and I really liked Altair's scene with Malik, showing both his growth as an assassin and as a person. For combat, there's only your sword and dagger to attack, so in any type of combat, it really just means you're using your sword, since there is no reason to use your dagger unless you're throwing a knife. And there is only one sword, one dagger, one type of enemy, etc., so things are a little lacking in variety. There are, unfortunately, a lot of technical issues that do hold it back. So the original Assassin's Creed game actually has a bug where it keeps trying to reach out to a server that does not exist, so about every 30 seconds of gameplay you get a random freeze for about 3 to 5 seconds, which is insane that they haven't fixed it yet. The fact that I had to disconnect my internet for my entire playthrough was frustrating, but honestly something I could somewhat look past. The physics being tied to my monitor's refresh rate, less so. It made the interactions with the leap of faith and even some of the free-running mechanics very frustrating when trying to explore the cities. The enemy AI is also quite weak, being able to assassinate 2 guards standing right next to each other and not have them notice I killed one of them. And there are a lot of random NPCs who just shove you in the street and throw rocks at you while you're climbing? For no reason. Why? While I can appreciate there being 3 different cities, they do not differ a lot from each other in a meaningful enough way to warrant them being there. They are different in color palette, but that's really about it. The minimap in this game is also completely useless in navigating these cities, as all it shows you is where the objectives are, with no actual information about the streets and rooftops you have to navigate around. Also, why in God's name are there over 400 side collectibles / flags? They make the feathers in Assassin's Creed 2 look like child's play. And I can appreciate having things to collect in the game, but 100 flags in each area is just overkill. The story of this first game follows Altair ibn Ahad as he is stripped of his rankings and demoted back down to a novice after he ruins a mission to retrieve a piece of Eden from Solomon's temple and gets one of his brothers, Kadar, killed. Altair, being stripped of his rankings, then slowly builds his rank back up while doing all of his surveillance work for his targets, each of them being Templars who conspire to retrieve the apple. Altair, I think, is fine as a protagonist, but I really think he is way too hyped up as the best assassin ever by both the assassins in the series and some fans. He is fine. I think his story arc is actually good, because as I said earlier, you really do see a lot of personal growth from him, where he learns humility and patience as well as what the creed really means to follow it. But I mean, like, he didn't actually do anything that insane. Yes, he did all his recon on people, but like, so did Connor, so did Ezio, so did the Fry twins. I don't know, man, he just doesn't really seem like all that. So overall, not a great start, but also not a bad one for a game made in 2007 and also the first game of the franchise. And to start us off, Assassin's Creed OG took me 18 hours and 27 minutes to complete. So not terrible, it could have been a lot worse, but overall for the game, I'm going to give it a C rating, which I know is weak, but especially compared to the rest of the franchise, there's a lot of better entries. With that being said, let's move on to Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 2 is my first experience with the series, and replaying it brought back many memories I was more than happy to relive. Being able to see the first steps of Ezio becoming a part of the Assassin Order, and all the rich characters around him really make this game shine. The early city building of Monte Regione was also very before its time, and watching the city progress and become lively when you invest into the city and fill up the armory is a very nice touch. While there are some touches around the parkour mechanic that could use some love, much like its predecessor, it was still very nice to move around the cities of Florence and Venice with a little Tuscany and Rome sprinkled in. While it may not be my absolute favorite of the series, it is absolutely a strong contender. The enemy variety is also heavily improved upon, with enemies that will counter you quite well, and heavy enemies that will require heavier weapons to counter them properly. Weapon variety is also much better, and this is the first game where you are able to loot bodies, upgrade your armor, and upgrade your weapon pouches, which I think is a very good direction for the game. The maps you can purchase so you can find all the loot is also a very nice touch to help you from a completionist perspective, as well as giving you more than enough money to upgrade your hideout and purchase all your weapon and armor upgrades. Also quickly, why was there that random new movement mechanic with that bouncing pole in the last act which we never see again? What was the reason for that? The journey of Ezio is beautiful to see from the eyes of the player. And in Assassin's Creed 2 you get to experience the first beginnings of Ezio, from his distress and rage from losing his family to his pursuit of hunting down the people responsible, all while having the people around him help guide him to follow in his father's footsteps as an assassin.
It's a me, Mario!
While there is of course a lot more to his journey than just this game, there is still an incredible amount of growth you see in Ezio. You follow Ezio after his family is killed by Rodrigo Borgia, and hunt down him and all of his associates to get revenge for your father and your brothers. And then of course, Rodrigo becomes the Pope, which means you get to experience beating the absolute shit out of the Pope with a bunch of your clones, which can only be described as one of the most hilarious and iconic video game scenes I've ever seen. It was easy to follow, very understandable, and everything about the story made sense, so it made the adventure that much more enjoyable. And of course, we get to see the great sidekick of Leonardo da Vinci, who helps Ezio in whatever way he is able and is just a great fun character all around. The feathers were definitely annoying to collect in this game, but you do get a really good mace out of it, and there were only 100 between all the locations, so considering the slog that was Assassin's Creed 1, it does balance out that way. There's also, of course, the Assassin Tomb under Monteriggioni, which while the armor looks nothing like Altair's, it is great to see the introduction of finding hidden tombs and treasures to unlock a relic of the past, which is a staple in basically every game after this one. All the cities were also really nice to walk around in, Venice and Florence especially, with Venice having some really fun sequences of hunting down people who were traveling through the waterways. Like I said during my review, Assassin's Creed 2 was actually the first game I ever played with the Assassin's Creed series. And I didn't remember all of Assassin's Creed 2 from when I originally played it, but there was still a lot there that I really did enjoy. There was a lot of good mechanics, there was a lot of good innovation, and overall it was just a very good game overall. Assassin's Creed 2 took me 21 hours and 36 minutes to complete, bringing the timer to just about 40 hours, which is not bad for 2 games. Oh, also I'll be giving Assassin's Creed 2 an A rating, because like I said, great story, it was a great time, just great experience. On to our next entry, Brotherhood. Okay, so I'm doing this again because I forgot to hit record. I was going through my editing, and I realized that when I was talking about the innovation that Assassin's Creed 2 did, I never really went into detail about what that meant. But essentially, especially during Assassin's Creed 2, there was a lot of innovation with... I did mention the innovation with the combat, but especially there was also a lot of innovation with the free running, where there was actually... It was a lot more fluid compared to Assassin's Creed 1, and you could see there was like little sort of dedicated sections where like, you could see where they wanted you to free run to, so it made it a little bit better that way. There was the fast travel system introduced, which obviously was very helpful for the series, especially going into Assassin's Creed 3, or not 3, Brotherhood. And then there was also the faction system that was introduced with like the thieves and courtesans and stuff like that, which was also a really good touch and was also a bit of stable, especially until about Unity, I believe it was when they kind of started moving away from that. But yeah, that's just what I forgot to add, and hopefully I don't have to do this again. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is an upgrade on the great formula of Assassin's Creed 2 in every way. A continuation of the battle between Ezio and the Borgia, the game starts abruptly, going from the assassin fortress to Monteriggioni to waking up in Rome with nothing and having to build his forces again from scratch. However, many of the criticisms I could have had in Assassin's Creed 2 are fixed here. While you do not get to see the city flourish back to life as you rebuild it, you can see some aspects of your control of the city take shape as you furnish the guild buildings again. The annoying collectibles now get a map once you find enough, which is amazing for completionists like myself, and instead of going to multiple cities, most of your efforts are actually focused inside Rome, making the game a lot more cohesive from sequence to sequence. And of course, the main mechanic of the game of recruiting your Brotherhood is by far one of the game's best features ever. Recruiting your assassins and leveling them up feels rewarding, and as you send them on missions throughout Europe and call them in a fight, it truly makes you feel like a master of the Assassin Order. The Templar Tower mechanic is also introduced in this game, and it has you clear different parts of Rome from Borgia influence so you can take back the city and rebuild it to its former glory, with some of the tower captains having different behaviors, such as being a little bit more skittish, a little bit more combative, things like that, which is honestly really cool. The combat in this game also has one of its most significant updates to it yet, which is kill chaining. Once you kill one person, you can chain together a multitude of one-hit KOs, which, while it can make some of the combat feel a little bit simple, it still feels incredibly satisfying to be able to mow down a horde of guards. Brotherhood is also the first game to include side objectives and missions, which count towards 100% completion, which is both a great change and a frustrating one. Because while it gives the player something more to work towards, some of the missions can be incredibly frustrating if there are technical issues, which make you have to replay missions a few times over until you can get your sync right. The reason for this is that while yes, there are checkpoints in the missions, if you fail the full sync objective, you cannot actually reload to a checkpoint. And if you kill yourself after you failed to fully sync, it keeps the fact that you failed the objective, making the fact there are checkpoints worthless. The feathers make a return as a collectible in this game, as do Borgia flags, which gives me PTSD from the first game, and there are also 6 total layers of Romulus, which once completed, they give you access to Brutus's armor, which looks sick as hell, and the dagger of Brutus, which while I do prefer swords in the Assassin's Creed games, the dagger is a really good dagger. The story was nothing short of spectacular. Starting off with an explosion as you get attacked in your own home and wake up in Rome with nothing to your name, watching Ezio revive the Brotherhood's efforts in Rome and become the new head of the Brotherhood is such an enjoyable experience. And watching you dismantle the Borgia and cripple them as you go up against the overwhelming forces of Cesare and the Papal Army makes the game so incredibly satisfying to play through. The modern day story also ends with a heartbreaking twist, and I cannot wait to see where the story goes, as well as the development of Subject 16 into the story, but I will remain spoiler free as best as I can. All I will say is that the game is absolutely perfect in its story and its delivery. 10 out of 10, no notes. Hi again, you might remember me from a few minutes ago when I said I really hoped I didn't have to do this again. I completely forgot to talk about the War Machine missions, like the Leonardo da Vinci like War Machines. Those are, I forgot to include them probably because they were pissing me off at the time, because the one for the tank and not taking any damage is bullshit, but still incredibly fun mission, still I'd say a really iconic part of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, like especially, Leonardo da Vinci and like his relationship with Ezio in both Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are really pivotal toward, because he's like such a helpful like side character in the game. But yeah, just thought I'd mention that quickly again, and hopefully I don't have to do this again. Brotherhood took me about a full 24 hours to complete with DLC included. And I didn't really talk about the DLC too much because it was really just a few throwaway quests, which one of the quest lines was Leonardo going missing while trying to find the Temple of Pythagoras, which for some reason is in Italy. However, that brings our total now to just around 64 hours. And I don't think it'll surprise anyone, but Brotherhood is going to be the first S rating of this video. I mean, honestly, it is kind of Assassin's Creed 2, but improved upon in about every way, so it does make sense for us to be the first S rating. And I have to say so far with this review that I'm actually mildly impressed with all I've seen. For every game we've played so far, we keep seeing steady improvements from each entry onto the next, and it gives me some, really good hope, because I think this is a trend that's going to keep continuing with Revelation. You can definitely tell that Revelations has been given an upgraded budget right from the start, with the incorporation of cutscenes into the gameplay and more upgraded visuals as the game carries on. The movement controls in Revelations also feel much more fluid, with the hook blade allowing for new movement options with ziplining, running past guards, and other use of corner turning while free running around buildings. There are some changes to the shops to fit the setting which are nice, and some changes to the assassin recruitment, with DNA missions specifically for recruitment, which I do like a lot in concept. However, there is not an easy way to differentiate them from regular recruitment missions, which makes it difficult to tell what they are, and as a result you can skip them by accident and lock yourself at 100% sync. The bomb crafting system and the tower defense system also make their debut, which is very interesting for the crafting and very puzzling for the tower defense minigame. Also puzzling is the fact that mercenaries and thieves keep their names, but for some reason the courtesans are now Romani? They aren't just a reskin of the courtesans at least, but it doesn't feel right. Also on today's episode of Ubisoft breaking their old games, when they disabled the online multiplayer elements of Revelations, they also disabled the ability to access the Desmond missions without the workaround. Which, while I was luckily able to get them running, how an error like this even happens is a great question. The more I play through Revelations, the harder it feels to be able to rank. On the one hand, they do some things really well. I really like how much they flesh out the Assassin Den / the district system, and allowing you to put your apprentices in control of the districts and doing missions with them and teach them how to handle the Templars is really cool. I really like the new movement system and how much it brings to the table, and the minimap you have in this game is the best by far it's been in the series. On the other hand, removing the posters for taking away heat is annoying, buying shops giving you heat is even worse, and I hate that the most basic way to remove your heat is to bribe heralds, even though you can just steal the money back as soon as you bribe them, which is really funny. And I understand that they were trying to use this as a way to make sure that players were almost forced to interact with the tower defense minigame, but if you have to force the player to interact with it, it's just a terrible design choice. The weapon system suffers the same Brotherhood problem, where your weapons don't actually matter as long as you just counter kill and kill chain. There are only 2 faction missions, which make the fact that there are only 2 feel useless. Why even include them? Sophia missions half the time don't actually relate to Sophia. The DNA strand itself feels incredibly unorganized, with the Sophia missions being part of the main strand. Masyaf key missions are also Sophia missions, and that's before we even start talking about the fact that some of the 100% requirements are incredibly annoying, even more so when they were introduced with Brotherhood. The UI itself is also downgraded, in my opinion, with the health bar becoming a more boring version of itself, and the bright colors of the animus now turning dark and murky, which, while I can understand this may be for thematic reasons, it just brings your mood down going through the menu screens. Also, I know in the story Istanbul was just hit with an earthquake, but I feel like most of the buildings in this city just look bad. There are so many buildings that just look decrepit that makes every area feel like there's no differentiation between the districts. While I know that I complain about Assassin's Creed 2 feeling the same city to city, at least the Vatican and Brotherhood did feel a lot more regal in sense compared to the rest of Rome, and even the original game was on the right track with the different districts, but in Revelations it just seems to miss the mark pretty much everywhere. Collectibles in Revelations make their debut as Animus Fragments, which is an nod to restoring the state of the Animus, since unlocking enough fragments gives you access to new missions where you go through Desmond's backstory, which is kinda cool, but the missions are these weird first-person Animus platform missions, so I don't know, they're fine, I guess. There are also 10 memoir pages which unlock a tomb under Hagia Sophia, which unlocks the armor of Ishak Pasha, which looks so good, and has a mascot which makes you look baller as fuck. The story for Revelations was honestly a strong point for me. You follow Ezio to Masyaf and subsequently Istanbul, where he's trying to find the ancient library of Altair and how to open it. Meanwhile, you're also fighting the Turkish Civil War succession for the throne between the Ottomans and the Byzantines, who are backed by the Templars. While Revelations is shorter compared to its trilogy counterparts, I really did enjoy the I'm gonna fucking kill myself. While Revelations is shorter compared to its trilogy counterparts, I really did enjoy the intrigue of the main story, and there were some surprising twists and turns I genuinely did not see coming, especially in the later sequences. While things get increasingly strange towards the end with the First Civilization story, the end of the story for both Altair and Ezio is quite satisfying in my opinion, as well as getting to learn more about the past of Desmond Miles.
So the continuing trend thing might have been a lie. I don't really know what else to say here besides what the fuck is a tower defense mode doing in this game? You can, give the series a lot of shit for like some of the mechanics they try to implement, but at least most of them do make sense. The tower defense mode, I understand the vision of what they were trying to do, but it just did not work with the intended gameplay loop that they wanted to have, in my opinion. Revelations was actually the shortest entry of the series so far, though, clocking at 15 hours and 15 minutes. Total time for the series now is about 80 hours, and we're just going to keep chugging along. Oh, also, Revelations is a B. It's not a bad game on a technical level, mostly, but it's just definitely not to the same caliber of game that 2 and Brotherhood were, but it's got enough charm to keep it above a C rating, so yeah, it's going to get a B.
Assassin's Creed 3 may still have one of my favorite opening sequences of any game ever. This twist of finding out Haytham is a Templar is one of those moments which you never forget going, wait, what? And Haytham himself is honestly a very interesting character to play as at the start of the game, with a charming mix of posh and intimidating, as he relentlessly tries to find the vault in the New World. The story of AC3 is also one that I found myself enjoying more and more as the game went on. You start as Haytham, of course, trying to open the precursor vault in the frontier of America, and then relive Connor's life as a child, watching his village get burned by the Templars, where afterwards he seeks out Achilles in order to train and hunt down those who burned his village, and do what he can to help secure the freedom of his people. You then slowly kill those responsible as you help George Washington and the revolutionaries in becoming a nation free from King George and the British. While Connor is unfortunately a pawn in this game used to help Desmond towards his goal, the story itself for Assassin's Creed 3 was one that was interesting and enjoyable. You can see the growth of Connor from a more naive child to realizing he must do whatever it takes in order to make sure that his people are safe. Connor himself is a protagonist I remember disliking, but revisiting this game I really end up enjoying. His stoic, straightforward, burning conviction is a very welcome change to the charming bravado of Ezio, and watching him go through every battle, seeing his dedication to hunting down the Templars, and watching as he builds his homestead make for a story which is touching in quite a few ways, especially with Haytham saying that he is proud of Connor and showing his respect even though he has just been slain by his hand. Tyranny of King Washington is also an incredibly interesting experience, showing both a very savage view of an alternative George Washington and a very interesting look into a more spiritual version of Connor. There are a lot of system upgrades in Assassin's Creed 3 which take a little getting used to, but they are very welcome nonetheless. While there is a change in the button mapping and how freerunning works, the actual freerun system is greatly expanded, being able to climb and swing from trees and run across rooftops and through houses in colonial America. No. Wow, I cannot fucking speak ever. Being able to climb and swing from trees and run across rooftops and through houses in colonial America feels great. There is now a hunting system which is very engaging, having to bait and hunt animals so you can maximize the amount of materials you can get from them, and of course we get introduced to naval combat, which leads into one of the greatest games to ever come out of the franchise. This is also just proof that we should have had a modern day Assassin's Creed game forever ago. They can absolutely do it. Do it. We need it. God damn it! They never do it. The Brotherhood mechanic also makes for a turn, but not in a way I particularly enjoy. With Brotherhood and Revelations, it really felt like you could build up your Brotherhood from anyone, and allow anyone to don the robes of an assassin and rise through the ranks. However, in this game, they don't even don the robes. Yes, they can rise through the ranks, but it feels strange to have one of your first recruits, which is a French chef with a butcher's knife, still wielding a butcher's knife and not even changing his outfit? Is he even trying to be an assassin? I know the creed is all about freedom and liberty to the people, but can we at least make sure people stick to the dress code? Like, I get most people don't want to wear the baggy hood or whatever, but can you at least wear the jacket or something? Are you even trying to fit in here? Why didn't anyone look at this and go, oh yeah, you can recruit these people, but they're not actually going to adhere to the creed. They're just going to run around as normal still. Why? The combat system in Assassin's Creed 3 is one of the most fun combat systems I've ever played with. Going from a counter system to a parry-based system keeps the game a lot more fluid and fast-paced, and the double takedowns, while they can be rare, have such a large payoff that it's always so fun to watch them. Connor himself is a lot more brutal with how he takes people down, making his animations very fun depending on what weapon you use, my personal favorite being, of course, the tomahawk. The areas in New York, Boston, and the Frontier are also very fun to run around in and explore, with both cities feeling the same but different enough that you can tell them apart. Both areas have their upsides, with the Frontier being fun to explore and hunt in, while the cities have an underground tunnel system, giving a very interesting way to expand a fast travel system for use inside the cities. For collectibles, there are feathers which you can find in the Frontier, and then almanac pages that you can find in the cities, which let you unlock different inventions at your homestead. And then of course there are peg-leg trinkets that unlock special naval missions that give you map pieces, which then lets you find Captain Kidd's ring, which lets you literally deflect bullets, which is so sick. And let me tell you, there's another game coming up where this shit would have been really nice. While there are some technical issues here and there, this is honestly a game that I did not expect myself to have this much fun with, and I was very happy to revisit it and have my opinion changed.
I'll be honest, Assassin's Creed 3 was actually a lot better than I remember. And I don't think this will be controversial, but I'm actually going to give it an A over Assassin's Creed 2. I really like the story, I really like the homesteading, we got a great introduction to naval combat, and overall, just the trend of the game's improving continues. Assassin's Creed 3 clocked in at just over 28 hours with an extra 6 hours and 47 minutes for the DLC. Meaning for the series total, we're just at 114 hours. And this is where we'll also see the first reason why I kind of grouped them all into different eras, because this is actually our first game of the sailing era, and you'll notice that the games actually start getting a little bit longer compared to each era. So that'll be a fun thing to keep an eye on moving forward. Like I said earlier, though, Assassin's Creed 3 is going to get an A, and yeah, great experience, great time. And let's move on to our first underdog of the series, in my opinion, Liberation. So just a heads up, especially heading to the Liberation section, for some reason it took me like a full week to figure out how to get the recording done properly, because I've been using Streamlabs for like basically every game up to Liberation, and for some reason Liberation kept giving me encoding errors when I was trying to record with it, so I had to switch over to OBS, and then there was a whole bunch of shit with OBS. So hopefully it actually works better now, but if the gameplay looks like shit, it's because for some reason Liberation does not like being recorded. So hopefully it doesn't happen for any future segments, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, that's all. So obviously the first thing I must point out is that due to this being a title for the PS Vita, I will not critique the game graphically by any means, even though it looks surprisingly decent. Also, the game itself is only 3 gigabytes, which is pretty insane that a whole Assassin's Creed game is 3 gigabytes. Anyways, what I can critique is the fact that going to any menu takes a good few seconds, which is very annoying when you come from other games that put you into the menu you choose instantaneously. I also wish they used the voiceover going from sequence to sequence instead of a text dump. Even though I'm sure it saved on some resources, it does take away from the experience, and I feel like you're not getting to see Aveline and her thought process throughout the story the same way as you do Connor or Ezio in Revelations. I'm actually really surprised about the Sky/the dressing room system, since it's honestly a really cool idea, and I can't believe I haven't seen or heard anything about it since this game released, because I think it's a great idea which would have been really cool to see in other titles. While it is slightly annoying that the assassin persona has a floor being investigated on site, I really enjoy being able to sneak around in different personas, and it makes a lot of sense to be able to infiltrate a plantation as a slave, governor's mansions as the Lady of Grand Play. I think those are really cool ways that they implemented this. However, there are a lot less options to earn income in this game to fill out your armory. There are the chests and the trading system, but the trading system can only be accessed from the warehouse in New Orleans, so it falls to the wayside quite easily. Aveline herself I like as a protagonist. She's a good mix of strong, but not bloodthirsty, and watching her spare people that you could see someone like Altair or Edward killing is interesting compared to. And you can see some of the noble qualities of Connor in Aveline, personally. And for a game that released on the PS Vita, there's a surprising amount of content in this game that I did not expect, with there being a lot of side content with Persona collectibles, Persona-specific missions, and missions to free slaves and take out your business rivals. I do not know what type of shit they were on when they made this story, but it was honestly very well done. The pacing was really good, and you can see Aveline's turmoil as she tries to grasp if what she's doing is right, especially when her mentor Agate is just an absolute bitch for the most part. Also, my god, the last couple story beats were incredibly well done, with there being a lot of intrigue and a very strong ending, and while, like with most Assassin's Creed games, there isn't usually a good, what are they gonna do? Shit. And while, like with most Assassin's Creed games, there isn't usually a good, what are they gonna do now type of ending, the ending we were given felt very satisfying and rounds out the adventures of Aveline in New Orleans very well. I also think they did a very good job with the environments. New Orleans feels very good to explore and is really fun to run around in, and the bayou actually feels really fun and almost more fun to run around in than the Frontier Assassin's Creed 3, with a lot of the trees being able to stretch over vast amounts of the bayou so you can actually scout out all the collectible mushrooms and persona trinkets from above. However, there is the slight annoying issue of the fact that for some reason when you spawn into the bayou, you spawn in as the lady persona on respawn or jumping back into the game. This wouldn't be an issue if the lady persona was able to free run, but as I said earlier, she cannot. Which means you cannot go into the trees or use the very convenient canoes to actually get back to anywhere you can change your persona, which makes it incredibly annoying to get around. You also have collectible alligator eggs, Mayan statues, and diary pages, which all unlock new hats, and then collectibles for each different persona, which is interesting. And there are also like 20 different pocket watches you can buy that don't do anything, but I appreciate that they're there. The story itself was honestly quite good despite the way it started.
You start out as a child who gets lost in a crowd with your mother abandoning you, and you never see her again. You are then raised by your father and stepmother, who help you save slaves and help them get out of New Orleans. You then infiltrate a Templar plot where they have taken slaves and sent them down to Mexico to look for a precursor site, where you find your mother who you thought was dead, and also discover that your stepmother is actually a Templar. This is also the first true sighting of Erudito, who is a hacker group that keeps popping up throughout the series and actually unveils what's really happening in the story and not just what Abstergo shows you. Listen, I know I've been having Assassin's Creed memes which are just shitty and low res on this screen, but I couldn't find a good meme about Liberation which doesn't spoil it, which I've been trying to keep the review mostly spoiler free. With that being said, I did expect Liberation to be one of the worst entries of the series, because I quite literally never hear anyone talk about Liberation. But I'm not gonna lie, it was actually a lot better than I expected. Was it perfect? No. Not even close. Was it good? Absolutely. It was definitely an underdog, but it had some really surprisingly good mechanics and also a surprisingly deep story, which honestly came together really well. So, Liberation is actually going to get a solid B over Revelations. Liberation also took me 10 hours and 19 minutes complete, so we're just about to 124 hours for the series. And now we move on to possibly one of my favorite games of all time, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. What else can I say about this game besides the fact that they really just put so much heart and soul into it? Not to say that the games that came before Black Flag were lacking passion or they were bad in any means, but when I say that Black Flag really comes together in every way, it just does. This may be the only game on this list that, when I'm playing it, it's just so hard to put down because there's so much that I want to finish. I keep telling myself, oh, just one more fort, or wait, that ship has the metal I need, and before I know it, another hour has gone by. This game perfectly encapsulates the rule of every 30 seconds give the player something to look at in a way that Elden Ring just did so well. The environments already benefit from the vibrant, luscious setting of the Caribbean, with a beautiful ocean to sail in when you're going from Havana to Nassau and everywhere in between. And while you pass the time sailing from location to location, you get to be serenaded by the crew singing shanties, and you can find new shanties throughout the world to change up which songs they play, which is just such a fun little feature. The hunting mechanics get an extra boost with ocean hunting, allowing you to go after humpback whales and bull sharks, and of course, the naval combat from Assassin's Creed 3 gets cranked up to the absolute max. You get chain shots from your front side, mortar cannons, your trusty naval ram, and a gigantic swath of upgrades for your ship to make it as deadly as possible. The homestead is gone, but you do have a home base in the form of the hideout at Great Inagua, where you can build a harbor master station, a tavern, and a general store, as well as upgrading the mansion at the top of the hideout, which you can use to store all your treasures from your fleet, which we will get into a bit later. I will say in general, the hideout really does not do that much for you overall, and unlike Assassin's Creed 3, there are no quests that help you progress it or the people in it, but it is still nice to have. Edward is also potentially a better protagonist than Ezio in my opinion. While Ezio has the charming bravado of an Italian noble, Edward has the cutthroat nature of a Welsh pirate, and even though he's an assassin for most of the game, you can feel the sheer amount of danger he gives off in his presence alone. Ezio may have been deadly, but he felt more measured and composed, thinking of strategies and the best way to handle his opponents. Edward, on the other hand, values strength above all, and will rush headfirst into the fray until no one is left standing. At least at the start of his journey. The more the game moves on, you can see Edward worry about killing literally everyone, instead of wanting to spare the lucky few who wouldn't need to die when given the opportunity. You can see his transformation throughout the story from a pirate who values golden reputation above all into a man who wants nothing more to have a crew who he can stay behind in a way that I think is really well done. The Brotherhood mechanic is gone in this game and now replaced with Kenway's fleet, as you control the Navy is sent out to all ports of the Western world to trade, similar to Assassin's Creed Liberation. In concept, I like this mechanic, and it is technically done better than in Liberation since you can access it from your ship, which you spend most of your time on. What I do not like is the fact that you cannot actually see what rewards you are getting from each mission in Kenway's fleet, which is really annoying because some of those rewards are things like buried treasure maps, which you need to get 100% completion. I do like the fact that the fleet missions are tied to real time instead of game time, so you can actually progress the fleet while you're offline. I do not like the fact that they use this to justify some of the fleet missions taking up to 36 hours to complete with a base speed ship, making unlocking the final buried treasure map absolute agony. The crypts and vaults used to unlock endgame armor are replaced with the Templar hunts, which I like as a change, especially since the Brotherhood mechanic does not make a return in this game. You are able to experience the assassins of the West Indies in a way that is interesting, and you get to see their motivations in their fight for survival, even if you might have cost it. You also have sea shanties, animus fragments, buried treasure, mines, deli, which also leads you to another endgame armor set, manuscripts, and messages in bottles. All these combined are a lot to collect, but the areas that you explored that aren't the main cities are honestly pretty small, even if you are exploring a gigantic open seas, so it feels like much less of a slog. It also helps that the treasure maps have coordinates for the islands on them, so you actually have an idea of where to go. The story itself is one I find extremely fascinating to be a part of. Starting out as an imposter, you infiltrate a Templar meeting and learn about a treasure that could set you up for life, and then make it your life's mission to find this legend, while you try and make a better life for every man that doesn't swear fealty to the crown. And as you're going through this journey, one filled with bloodshed and betrayal, you get to see how Edward goes from having many compatriots in Nassau he can call friends, to eventually no one but himself, when even Adewale's quartermaster realizes that this life does not have any ending but at the bottom of the ocean, while Edward's sights have been set on nothing but whatever gold he can find in front of him. You personally have to see Thatch and Mary Reed die in front of you, and you have to kill Ben Hornigold and a few other ex-pirates yourself. And then Steve Bonnet, who you see throughout your adventure as a lovable but naive merchant wanting to live a life of adventure, you hear was hung at the gallows, which breaks your heart because it was a fate he did not deserve. Once Edward realizes the mistakes of his life's journey, he finally comes into the arms of the assassins, understanding and valuing the creed instead of using it as a way to justify his outlook on life and how he lives it. S. Instant S. Top of the leaderboard. Better than Brotherhood. Not that I think anyone's really surprised by me ranking it at an S, but it's just so good. It's so fun. The story is so well done. I couldn't be happier to be replaying it. Black Flag also now takes the spot for the longest game on our list right now at 33 hours, but again, with the way the game was structured, I could be playing it for at least 20 more hours, and it would have felt like no time passed at all. We're now at 157 hours and 30 minutes for the series, and now it's time to move on to another underdog. I'm not too sure what to expect from Freedom Cry, given that it was originally a Black Flag DLC, but we're about to find out. Originally, I was going to say that I was disappointed that this was so short, which I do still believe to an extent. However, Freedom Cry was a pleasant mix of Black Flag Light, with a story that has one of the most heart-wrenching missions I've ever experienced. While the story itself is short, with the entire game taking only about 5 hours in length, including hunting for materials and maxing out ship upgrades, the story was straightforward, easy to follow, and still held some really interesting pieces. Following Adewale's journey to Port-au-Prince to help a local slave rebellion, Adewale takes control of his own ship while he helps free the slaves who are so desperately in need of help. Mixed in with this rebellion is a woman who owns a brothel, helping out the French governor with an exchange of information so she can free as many slaves as she can, even if it is through the help of the Templars in some situations. Adewale's heroics then lead to one of the most heartbreaking missions I've ever experienced, where while you are fighting to free a slaver ship, the French have been ordered to make sure if they are going to be freed, they would rather they die, and while you were trying to free the slaves on a burning ship, you have to listen to the screams around you of all the people who you couldn't help. And it was so somber that even after playing it, I still feel emotions I would have never expected from a DLC in a video game of all things. While Freedom Cry was a short adventure, it packed a punch in ways I never could have expected. Adewale is a protagonist I do enjoy. Strong in his convictions and beliefs, he never compromises on his fight to make sure that all of his people can be free. He's driven by purpose where Edward was driven by greed, and even though he may not have Edward's cunning or charisma, he makes up for it in his straightforward approach of getting his job done. I do wish we got to experience him much more, because I think we've made the most of any extra time that we got with him at the helm of his own ship or his own faction of the Brotherhood. The map of Freedom Cry was very small in scale compared to Black Flag, with only a few small islands with plantations to raid and only one big city. There are also no collectibles in this game besides machetes and blunderbusses around the map, so it wasn't much, but it was at least something to look out for.
So, definitely wasn't expecting that. Definitely an underdog, like I said before I started playing this. Definitely a good game, but holy fuck, was not expecting that from a DLC for Black Flag. But, you know, here we are. This is going as a B tier under Liberation, because while this game was good, Liberation was a lot more fleshed out and complete as a full game. Whereas, like I said, this was mostly a DLC of Black Flag, as it comes in at just about 5 hours and 7 minutes. And now we are at 162 hours and 37 minutes for the series. Will I continue to be surprised with Rogue? I really do hope so.
If I had a nickel every time an Assassin's Creed game had a game-breaking technical problem, I'd have way too many nickels, because one is already too many. However, after a very frustrating problem with the game not even launching, we are back into the swing of things, with Assassin's Creed Rogue feeling like a very interesting mix of Assassin's Creed 3 and Black Flag. With its own spin on naval combat, rebuilding New York City in a way that is oddly reminiscent of Assassin's Creed 2, with the Ezio Trilogy banking system making a return, a combination of exploring the colonial cityscapes and also the open ocean, with also a closed ocean? Rogue has some very interesting themes thrown at us right off the bat, and that's before we even get into the story as Shay. I really like the direction of most of the gameplay elements in Rogue. Naval combat does feel like it's seen an improvement with the replacing of the swivel guns with pucko guns, allowing for more freedom of their use in combat, and then making shipboarding an absolute breeze when they are upgraded. There are also naval battles you can stumble upon now to gain more resources resources from the French and British ships already fighting, making collecting resources a little bit easier, and there are no longer the use of gems in the fleet mechanic, keeping it nice and consistent with the use of British pounds. Naval missions also now, while unable to be completed all at once, have a lot fewer locations. The assassin contracts have instead been replaced with assassin interceptions, which is a fun change and one that I kinda really like. Instead of finding a target to silently dispatch, you find a target of the assassins and hunt down their would-be aggressors, using your eagle vision to spot them in the surrounding crowds and bushes before they can strike. However, there are also just gang members, because for some reason the game just can't call them assassins even when there's literally a giant assassin emblem in every hideout, everywhere in New York and some of your settlements, which they will literally hide on rooftops and wait around corners to try and ambush you, which, while I think it's a fun gimmick at first, it wears off really fast in my opinion. With that being said, the Templar Tower system does see a bit of a return in Rogue with the gang hideouts, where you have to flesh out the gang leader and kill them so you can liberate the district from the gang, and do you see my issue why they keep calling it a gang already? It is the assassins, they are assassins, just call them assassins, why this obsession of calling them a gang when they are the assassins? There are also the collectibles of the Viking swords, Templar relics, and native totems, which, while there are a lot of collectibles on top of the 200 animus fragments, hunting down all these items was surprisingly fun. For each one you get a fun new armor, and a new sword in the case of the Viking swords, so that was honestly a really fun time investment. Plus, with the Armor of Surgon DLC, there are crosses added as a collectible as well defined as armor. There are also some more sea shanties to track down, so that's fun, even though the new songs are eh. Also, you got the really interesting collectible of Prosperity? It makes it so that when you raid ships or get income from your renovations around the Maritimes, you get more of it, but like, why am I literally finding prosperity in a tree? That seems like a bit of an odd choice, but then again, most of this game is to an extent. The story of the game follows Shay, as he was originally an assassin in the Colonial Brotherhood, but after retrieving secrets from a precursor artifact to hang to Lisbon, he accidentally causes the Great Earthquake of Lisbon, and then subsequently thinks that Achilles set him up to cause the earthquake, which of course Achilles doesn't believe his stories about the earthquake. Shay then steals a manuscript and leaves the Brotherhood with a literal bullet in his back, where he is found by the Templars and helps them regain control in the colonies by hunting out his former brothers and sisters of the Creed, including his best friend, his mentor, and unfortunately, Adewale. Yeah, that one hurt. Now, the story and Shay himself are things I find interesting, but underwhelmed by in certain aspects. Shay does feel interesting because you can completely understand his motivations for feeling betrayed by the assassins and leaving with a bullet in his back, but his turn to the Templars feels way too smooth. He trusts the motives and actions of the Templars almost immediately when he first meets with Greg Monroe. There's barely any deliberation, no conflict as to joining with an enemy he's been trained to fight against. Monroe just tells Shay that he doesn't want to govern through an iron fist, and Shay just accepts it? While I understand the debt that Shay thinks he owes Monroe for saving his life, the fact that he does not have any hesitation to join the Templar Order makes the story feel a lot less interesting than it could have been. I understand that you're going through an insane amount of trauma by causing an earthquake, but you can't at least think of a couple more reasons as to why you don't trust the Templars? Or even ask a couple more questions of what their goals are before you start helping them out? There's more back and forth between a Mormon couple on their first date. But even then, the story just feels so short for the amount of possibilities it could have used for this. What about having Shay be a double agent for the Templars? Why not have more dialogue between both him and Hatham? They both turn from the assassins. Could we not see them bonding over that? There was just so much that they could explore, but it just feels like they didn't want to, which is so disappointing. When it comes to the map design, I am a little bit disappointed, honestly. I think that they do New York fine, and I really like that when you go into the open sea, you can use your naval ram to cut through the ice to get to where you need to go, but again, some of the choices with the map are odd. The closed ocean map, whatever you want to call it, just feels, I don't know. I kind of understand the idea of having these waterways you have to navigate through and to get to all these different settlements, but it just doesn't really translate that well gameplay-wise. It makes the traversal in these areas feel tedious and makes me really not want to use my ship in these areas. In general, I also find the open sea areas a little bit more bland than Black Flag, unfortunately. I think that's due to the winter environment just not being as visually appealing, which sucks, because I think there's, again, some interesting stuff for the collectibles, but it just doesn't do the same thing for me as Black Flag does. Also, what in the ever-living hell did they do to the free running system? I barely mentioned it in Black Flag because it felt so good in Black Flag, I never even noticed how good it was, if that makes sense. Every movement that I wanted to do, I could do. Everywhere I felt like I could go, I would go. But in Rogue, it feels like there are way too many times where I want to jump up onto a ledge and all of a sudden I'm jumping down onto the ground, or instead of climbing up onto a tree log to start running through the branches in a forest, I keep sliding under the log instead. It's just a stark contrast from its predecessor, which does the system so well that it felt near flawless. I don't know what they could have changed to make it feel worse. Also, they really like showing off this little climbing animation they made, which, okay, yeah, it's a fine animation, but
Well, I was surprised, but unfortunately not in the way I was hoping.
there was so much potential here, especially with the story, and I just feel like they didn't capitalize on it enough. I will say, I really like the combat. I really like the naval combat. I thought that was very well done, but it was just missing that extra something to put it over the edge. And for that, I'm going to put Rogue at the top of B, because like I said, it was good, but it just could have been so much better. And that's what frustrates me, is that I really think there was a lot of potential here that they just didn't tap into. And I'm really upset that they didn't. With that being said, Assassin's Creed Rogue took us 22 hours and 21 minutes to complete, and we are just under 185 hours for the series. Now moving on to possibly one of the most controversial entries of the series, Assassin's Creed Unity. I swear to fucking God, how do they manage to fuck at least one thing up on every single entry of this godforsaken franchise? The graphics have clearly been overhauled in the most impressive way we have seen so far, except you wouldn't be able to tell because when the game runs at over 100 frames per second, the actual graphics start to render at absolute dog shit to the point where you have to manually cap the frame rate in the NVIDIA control panel so that it doesn't go over the soft limit. God, I can't believe they find a new way to fuck up their games still. Can't wait to see what they fuck up in Syndicate. You also can't really tell if the graphics improve because somehow the render distance is way too small, because when you look at a building 40 feet away, you can still see it's just a square with the textures at 240p resolution before the actual model finally pops in. The freerunning has also been massively overhauled. They changed the control so that you can now both freerun up or down, and you can also control how you slide or vault over objects, which makes traversal a lot more interesting actually. The freerunning itself has also become a lot more floaty, but not in a way that's actually bad. Instead of grabbing every handhold on your way up a wall or surface, Arno's a lot better at leaping up or down where you want to go, which massively reduces the amount of time it takes to scale a building. On that note, you can also enter an insane amount of buildings in this game. Whereas before, in the sailing era, you used these buildings to just go from one street to the next, these buildings actually do have a lot of use of hiding chests and being a lot more useful to explore and see what's inside them, so honestly it's a really cool addition. Another cool addition was the Assassin's Creed Companion app, which before it was patched out, apparently you need to use the app to do glyph puzzles, which would unlock the Companion app missions scattered throughout the game, which, dear God, who came up with that idea, and please tell me they no longer work there. Side note, I actually really like the lockpicking in this game, and the fact that even with level 1 lockpicking, you can still unlock level 3 door if you're either good or determined enough to. What I don't like is the fact that these tutorials and UI are so bad that I didn't realize I could reload my pistol or my Phantom Blade until literally 40 hours into my playthrough. Or the fact that when you try and hold the left button to free aim during a fight, it literally will not let you and you automatically shoot the closest target. Or the fact that this combat feels so absolutely boring because it feels like you can only really properly attack one target at a time because there's no kill chaining. If you just try to attack a person who isn't a sniper, they'll just automatically deflect you 80% of the time. Or the fact that there are so many snipers in this game that feels like trying to go into any type of regular combat situation is the same as willingly stuffing a musket up your asshole. Or the fact that if your battle lasts long enough, corpses will actually despawn within the 10-meter radius of you before you can loot them. But even if you do try and avoid a direct battle, there are still so many sightlines that overlap for enemies that you could accidentally fart wrong and all of a sudden the entire fucking Max Tech squadron is locked on your ass before you can even say excuse me. Oh, by the way, do you want to move a body so the enemies can't see it? Too fucking bad, you can't move corpses anymore. Why? Who the fuck knows why? This game honestly started out so strong and it really just feels like any opportunity they could have taken to make things worse, they did. And of course, you can't talk about Unity without talking about the co-op missions. Unity is the one and only game in this franchise where you can enter missions in teams of up to 4 to carry out other missions Arno took on with some members of the Brotherhood. The benefit of these missions is that for heist missions to count towards full sync, you only have to play through them once, and in the story-driven co-op missions, you also have a chance to unlock more skill points to level up Arno. Now, for those paying attention at home, you may have noticed I said the benefit of heist missions is that you don't have to repeat them. And that's because some crackhead at Ubisoft made it so that in order to get all 3 gear rewards for co-op missions, you have to replay the mission 3 separate times. I understand you want to pad out the runtime of your game, but oh my god, was there really no other way to do this?
Also, what the fuck are these Helix Rift missions? What is the point of these? The direction they're trying to go in this game with the modern day story is just so weird. Obviously, we have the Desmond story in the OG era in Assassin's Creed 3, which is clear, concise, and ends on a pretty decisive note. Then we have the Abstergo Worker arc in the Sailing era, which is honestly still a pretty decent way of keeping a modern day narrative in the games, with interjections from both the Assassins and the Templars. And now we're starting a new arc, lucky with the return of Sean and Rebecca as Deacon and Bishop, but it's so incredibly disconnected that it really makes me wonder why they even included it. I like the direction of finding a second stage, but why do we have these super weird and random Helix Rift missions instead of a proper modern day level? It takes you out of the story so much that it really just becomes a detriment. Oh, you thought I was done with the Rift missions. Don't worry, I got some more bullshit coming at you. So, it took me a second to notice, but these Rift missions actually have collectible artifacts hidden inside them, which is annoying when you're on a timer in these missions. But you know what's so fucking stupid? I wonder if the team who came up with this made sure to check themselves into a psych ward after. Each mission only spawns one artifact per run, which is annoying. So for the levels with 4 artifacts in them, you have to do them a minimum of 4 times. But that's not all. If you collect an artifact from one of the 4 spawn locations, if it spawns there again on the next run, it does not count as a new artifact being found, which means on any given run, there is only a 25% chance that a run will give you the artifact you need in order to make sure you don't have to visit this hellhole level design ever again. And while I'm here, a lot of the mission counters for districts are just wrong. Like, the interface will say there's only one Paris story and one murder mystery in a single district, but then all of a sudden you have to find 2 Paris stories, and it turns out one of them is for the next district over, which is 5 Paris stories? How do you mess that up? That's something you should have been noticed on like day 1 of playtesting. If you were ever looking for where in the series that Assassin's Creed started overloading itself and going onto the RPG route, which technically this game has always had a decent semblance of RPG elements, which makes sense as why I transitioned to open world Gallus genre. I did not say any of that right. If you were ever looking for where in the series that Assassin's Creed started overloading itself and going onto the RPG route, which technically this game has always had a decent semblance of RPG elements, which has made sense as why it transitioned into open world style genre, even its transition was misguided, this was the game. Now, you no longer have to buy upgrades and new gear from shops, which, I'll be honest, while it's a time saver, it's annoying because it makes the game feel less immersive. Dear God. Before, when you only had your outfit and your weapons you had to change, now you have your headgear, chest, forearms, waist, legs, outfit, sword, heavy weapon, pistol, musket, pike, guillotine gun? Thank you, Dead King's DLC. And Jesus Christ, this is such an information overload that I don't understand how they thought it would be a good idea to just throw this all at you. Not to mention that now for your gear, it's broken down to 4 different stat categories: melee, ranged, health, and stealth, which is great. Now you can have some fun creating builds, which is suited for stealth or just mowing down a crowd of enemies, but in a game like this, it just feels so weird that this is the direction that Ubisoft wanted to take. Side note, I didn't really realize this until this game, but both Black Flag and Rogue 2 technically lack in weapon variety, with Edward only really having his dual swords and pistols, and then Shay, his sword and dagger combo, his pistol, and his trusty air rifle. But the combat of those games was fast-paced enough, and the crafting system was robust enough that it did not really feel like the gameplay was lacking in that variety. Especially with Shay's air rifle, because once you got the grenade launcher on that bad boy, you could do some serious work. But in this game, changing it back to also having health bars on enemies, they made combat feel that much slower, because now you can't just become a whirlwind in a fight and make it out without using 14 medicine packs and 3 rosaries. Also, this game introduces the perk system for leveling up your character, which while I do understand wanting to have a way to show progression, why in the hell am I unlocking environmental blending, a feature that's been a base ability of every single assassin since the game was even a concept inside someone's head, and why is double assassination and double air assassination 2 different skills I have to unlock? It just feels like you're trying to fill out a space for a system that you know isn't a great idea. For your home base, you have the Cafe Theatre, which is nice looking, but really doesn't do that much for you. It gives you some extra income and has some missions related to it in order to keep upgrading it, but besides that, it's really just there. For collectibles, there are cockades which unlock new color schemes, artifacts which unlock new mementos in your hideout, and Altair's outfit if you collect them all, and Nostradamus Enigmas, which are just some fuck-ass riddles scattered around the city which give you basically no help in solving them, because seriously, who the fuck actually thinks these are able to be solved without breaking out a fucking map and knowing Paris like the front of your ballsack? Anyways, if you do them all, you unlock the medieval armor Thomas de Carillon, which is just Altair's fit, but black. So that's also just another disappointing thing to pile onto this game.
Before I move on more to the story and the setting, I just want to take a moment to praise the UI team who decide to fuck things up that they literally did not need to change in any way. Like, especially in a game that focuses on stealth, one of the things you need is a very readable UI element to figure out if you're being detected, how long until an enemy realizes you're a threat and initiate combat, that sort of thing. And past games do this perfectly with a small circle icon that starts yellow, and then when they're going to initiate combat, fills up and turns red. It is very important to note here that circles are an easily readable UI interface. You know what is not? A fucking cube! There is literally no reason to turn this from a 2D object to a 3D one, besides the fact that you just want to show off some fancy new tech, and then forget to realize that you need it to actually work in the player's favor too. The other thing is that when you're doing murder mystery missions and need to collect files for the case, there will be a pop-up on the side of the screen whenever you collect a new data for the case, which is good. Until you're trying to read a letter or a note left on the ground and realize that the pop-up covers everything useful you're trying to read, which is not good. Sometimes I wonder how things make it through quality assurance in these games. Also, quickly, I mentioned it here and there in my review so far, but one of the things I do like in this game are the murder mystery missions. You essentially play detective and use your eagle vision to find clues on what murders have taken place and figure out who did it, which, while the UI was annoying at times, the actual missions were fun enough. The story of Unity basically follows Arno from becoming an orphan as a child and being brought up under Francois de la Serre. Then one night you try and sneak into a party to meet with his daughter Elise, who you have been secretly seeing, and then you are there at the scene of the murder of Francois and are subsequently thrown into prison. Then you find the grizzled assassin Balek, who introduces you to the Assassin Order, and once you escape, you spend your time trying to hunt down whoever killed Francois de la Serre. While you're on your quest for revenge, you get kicked out of the Assassin Order, become the town drunk of Versailles, and then Elise pulls you back for just one last mission to go out with a bang. Which, of course, you agree to, and then, of course, she dies, and then the game just ends? Not really a happy ending. Technically, you don't even find out if you become an assassin again. You just kinda kill Jamais, who is the one who killed Francois to become the new Templar Supreme God King, who is also a sage, which is why he's relevant to the non-existent modern-day plot, and then the game just kinda ends. Which just left me bitter and upset after spending 42 hours on this goddamn game, and I still have a DLC to go. Also, after you beat the game, you unlock this Sword of Eden, which is cool, I guess, but like, why am I just carrying around a precursor artifact? Ezio never kept the apple on him unless he needed to. Edward never carried the observatory on his hip because he knew how dangerous it was. But also, you're supposed to be a secretive cult member? Why the fuck are you carrying around this chunky ass sword which can draw more eyes than Oasis getting back together? Arno himself I actually found really interesting as an assassin. I like his tone and inflection, and throughout the story he has a clear, concise motive, and you can see that he has a good moral code that he does not stray away from, even when confronted by the surrounding characters. On that note, I really like a lot of the side characters you run into in this game. Belek is a really good introduction to the Assassin Order for Arno, being a gruff veteran to Arno's more bourgeois background, and Marquis de Sade was such an interesting party to bring into the story, even though he is literally the OG sadist. Even Elise I did like, and the dynamic between Arno and Elise is charming and whimsical in a way that I really did find fun to watch, although I think Arno was a fucking memory wraith or something? Instead of every single other game where you get a little sequence where you talk to your victim after you assassinate them, for some reason Arno can just see their memories? What the fuck? What even is this? How does this work? God, this game is a mess! One other thing to note is that the streets of Paris are done insanely well, with massive crowds of rioters filling the streets, readying the public executions. It really does feel alive, and it plays a huge role into blending into the crowds to get you around in missions, which I am a big fan of. That being said, the only reason you're able to tell you're in Paris is because of the French flags, because a lot of the accents in this game sound British?
You can't just bloody do what you please on my patch!
But hey, while we're here, a quick question. Does no one give a fuck about the precursor box? Literally at the end of Assassin's Creed Rogue, you kill Arno's father, who is an assassin, to reclaim the precursor box. Do none of the French assassins have any care for retrieving it? Like, what the fuck is the point of linking the two stories together if you're not going to have them intertwine in any way, shape, or form? Assassin's Creed 3 tied into Rogue more than this because you get to see the backstory of Achilles and Haytham's hatred for each other. You're telling me we can't even get a single fucking nod towards Charles Dorian besides Bellic mentioning it in passing after he saw Arno's pocket watch? You could have literally removed the ending of Rogue and it would have changed literally nothing about the events of this game, and it would have made me so much less infuriated. Also, the Dead Kings DLC was fine. You get a mortar attached to an axe as a weapon, so that's kind of cool, but also an hour into the campaign you're kind of a massive dick to a child for really no reason. Also, I guess we hate Napoleon now and France can't be saved. Fuck knows anymore, man. They didn't even try to give a backstory on what happens before the DLC, because it definitely takes place after the main story. Oh, one more fucking thing. You couldn't actually quit to the main menu ever. You could only quit to the desktop. Fucking stupid. Hi, editing here again. So, when I went to record footage for Unity, I realized that not only can you only have one save file for Unity, but you can't even go into the main menu and delete the save file. You have to actually go into your system files and delete the Unity save file so that you can start the game over again. What the fuck? D tier. Absolute D tier. This game completely destroyed my mental state. It almost is a trend of Rogue of there being so much potential that they just completely fucked up. This is also the second game besides the OG game that made me track my time manually, so fuck that too. 49 hours for the game with the DLC, 234 hours for the series. Moving on. So the initial first impression was not great, since the game launched straight into the game without going into any menus, on the wrong display and the wrong resolution, and the cloth physics are also locked in at 30 FPS, but after changing all that around in a small fix for the cloth physics, we're back into the swing of things with basically no headaches. So that is really nice after everything else I experienced over the course of the last couple games. I will say really quickly that there is one single game-breaking bug I encountered, which I personally find pretty entertaining. Basically, further into the story, there's a mission where you have to tackle a spy, but for some reason the animation doesn't play unless you put the refresh rate of the game to 60 Hz, put VSync on, and go into Task Manager and set the game to only run on CPU 1. I don't know why that happens or how that fixes it, but you only need to do it for like a 30-second segment of the game, so it's pretty funny to me. The first thing I'll say off the bat is that the combat animations themselves seem almost too fast. Like, Jacob is throwing haymakers with those brass knuckles like Barry Allen on enough cocaine Adderall to put a silverback gorilla on the ground. Animations in these games, I will say, have always been top-notch, but where Unity felt like the combat was moving at a snail's pace, Syndicate's combat moves so much faster, it almost feels like it's too much. That being said, the combat itself does feel so much better than Unity, and I'm really glad about the direction it's taken. The other really nice touch for combat is that you can put enemies in a near-death state, which means if you have multiple enemies in that state, you can trigger a multi-kill animation on up to 4 enemies at a time, which I think is a really cool feature. You get 3 weapon types, those being the Brass Knuckles, the Cane Sword, and the Kukri. Personally, I like the Brass Knuckles for Jacob and the Cane Sword for Evie, but that doesn't mean the Kukri is bad by any means. I just think those 2 weapons fit the characters in this setting a little bit better. The other gameplay improvement I really want to talk about is the assassination missions at the end of each sequence. Each mission is really good about highlighting infiltration opportunities, potential allies who can help you in the mission, and ways to unlock unique assassinations on your target that make the whole mission feel that much more special. And this is something that they did try to technically start with Unity, where they had Arno spot different ways you could actually infiltrate a place, but with Syndicate it really feels like they really perfected the formula of how these missions should feel. The skill tree system does make a return, with the skills split into 3 trees of combat, stealth, and ecosystem. Combat focuses on the melee and brawling combat, which Jacob gets to pick up a couple more skills in. Stealth focuses on getting around a little quieter and using silent weapons, with Evie getting a couple more skills in that area, and ecosystem focuses on traversing the world and the resources you can get from it, which, well, I'm not really sure why the ecosystem tree is needed. In general, the skill trees in this game do seem to have a lot more thought behind them than Unity, which is very nice. The other direction I'm glad was taken was traversal mechanics. In Unity, I didn't pay enough attention to it because I was too focused on the rest of the tire fire that was Unity to realize that there was no faster way to traverse around the map. Yes, the buildings were relatively close together, so that traversing over rooftops is pretty easy, but actually getting around the map without fast traveling would probably take a few hours. But in Syndicate, you get a grappling hook to to make scaling buildings and going from rooftop to rooftop significantly easier, and you also get carriages around London so you can play Grand Theft Buggy and actually not want to kill yourself trying to get across the city quickly. Once you actually make your way back to London, there's actually a surprising amount of activities to do. In order to take back the city from the main antagonist Crawford Starrick, the Fry Twins have to liberate districts from the rule of the Bladers, which is a street gang that is under control of the Templars. You can liberate districts by killing Templar leaders, liberating child slaves from factories, clearing out Blader gang strongholds, and targeting high-profile targets and getting them for the police. These activities have the related ally you can improve your relationship with in order to get new gear, crafting schematics, and crafting materials. And if you just want to cause some havoc and make some money, you can hijack carriages, disrupt smuggler boats, enter illegal fighting rings, and also rob trains, which is honestly really good that there's so many different activities to do around the city. You have the return of an inventor buddy with Alexander Graham Bell, who is more than happy to provide assistance to the Fry Twins with giving them their grappling hooks, a hallucinogenic poison, and shock grenades, which are just so cool, and I'm very glad we have them. You also get to meet Charles Dickens, Charles Darwin, and Karl Marx as a few fun figures from around the time period, with Darwin actually helping Jacob take on one of the first targets you find inside London. And here's actually something I noticed when I was playing this. Because of the rewards you get from allies from the various activities, towards the end of my run, I found myself contemplating if I should max them all out. In the Ezio trilogy, when the guild challenges didn't count towards 100%, I didn't give it a second thought, but here, I actually found myself wondering why I shouldn't do them. I mean, of course, the reason was I have an entire 5 RPG games to go through, but I mean, I just really found myself having a lot of fun with this game. You also have the return of a home base with a train that you turn into your headquarters after finishing your first gang war, which, while it is a little annoying going to the very last train car for the shop, the actual idea of having your home base be on the train is sick as hell, and I can't believe more people haven't done ideas like this before or since. The train also gets gradually nicer as the game progresses, which is really cool to see how taking down different targets allows you to have a better headquarters, and the train also houses an upgrade system, which is again split into 3 categories of Ringleader, Insider, and Swindler. Ringleader focuses on making the Rooks stronger and the Bladers weaker, giving your gang better weapons while cutting off the enemy's access to gear and resources. Insider focuses on having more tools available to you around the city, such as better cars roaming the streets, and Swindler focuses on you gaining more income from the city and reducing the amount you pay at shops. I don't have much else to say here, but all 3 of these upgrade trees did feel impactful while I invested in them, so thank God for that. There are helix glitches, beer bottles, pressed flowers, and illustrations around the city that you can collect, as well as music boxes which contain assassin crests that can be used to unlock Rouge's vault and unlock the Aegis armor for Evie, which, while it is a little disappointing that we get nothing for Jacob, I'm sure he will be fine. When you are collecting the music boxes and bringing them back, you do get a really nice animation for the vaulted armor opening up, which I think is great. Luckily, all the collectibles mentioned above, plus the chests, have their own map which you can purchase through the shops to track everything you need to collect. Well, technically, that's not quite true. The Helix glitches and music boxes do have a map you can purchase, but only through the eShop that Ubisoft is so desperate to put into their games as time savers. They have actually done this in some of their older games as well, but honestly, it wasn't as noticeable since the maps have been closer together and it's been relatively easy to get every collectible up until this point. But in Syndicate, even if you sync the viewpoint, there are still many glitches you can miss, which is very frustrating, so collecting them without a map or a guide will be a pain. The story follows the 2 Fry Twins who are just coming off a contract to kill David Brewster and recover the piece of Eden he is working on. You do kill him, but he does blow up the piece of Eden and his lab, although not before revealing that another Templar has found a second piece of Eden that they are bringing to London, which has not had a proper assassin presence in over 100 years. The city is basically controlled in every aspect by the Templar Grandmaster Crawford Starrick, who is poisoning the population with a soothing serum, controls the press, controls the transportation, and controls the streets with a gang called the Bladers. To combat Starrick, they create a new gang to oppose the Bladers called the Rooks, who then slowly but surely loosen Starrick's grip over London. Jacob establishes his presence with the Rooks and does most of the work killing Templar agents, while Evie looks into the news of a second piece of Eden, this one being the Shroud of Eden. Jacob and Evie are the prototype for the dual protagonists we see later in Shadows, and I have to say that overall I do really like Evie, but Jacob, while I do like his personality, is not great as an assassin. Evie is down to business and always has her eyes on the goal of serving the Assassin Order and getting the piece of Eden from the Templars. Jacob's a lot more full of wit and charm, which I do enjoy because there have been some moments where he actually has gotten a chuckle out of me, but he really is just kind of riding along, doing whatever, instead of focusing on the mission of the assassins, it feels like. Even though, ironically, he's been the main person focusing on taking the Templar presence out of London, Stark is a pretty good villain, in my opinion, and why the fuck are we in World War I? See, this is the really weird part of the City era where they put these random-ass Animus Time Warp missions inside them, and I really could not tell you why. But luckily, the whole thing is pretty short with only one main objective and then the same district mechanic, which leads to a Templar spy master you have to kill. Overall, not bad. Lydia is fine. I mean, you don't really play her long enough to know her well, so she's just kind of fine. All jokes aside, Crawford Sterk is a really good villain who you see throughout the story watching his subdued rage bubble up out of him, leading to possibly one of my favorite boss fights of all time. Victorian London, they did a really good job with. It feels really fun to move around in, and even though London and England are known for being dreary and gloomy, they did manage to make it enjoyable to hunt down targets and topple a Templar Empire in. Also, you get to go to Edward Kenway's old mansion that he bought after Black Flag, and that just makes me giddy inside. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the DLC for this game actually puts in crazy work. The Dreadful Crimes DLC is just the murder mystery missions from Assassin's Creed Unity, but better designed, and then it all accumulates into one final mission, which I actually could not wrap my head around over how good it was. So, genuinely, hats off to whoever put that all together, because that was one of the craziest missions I've ever seen. The last Maharaj was definitely worse, especially compared to Dreadful Crimes, mostly because it had a lot more glitches in it, but the story was decent, and it ended with a really nice nod to Hedwig Green and Evie finally getting together, which was nice to see. Then, of course, you get to Jack the Ripper, and oh, baby, that fucking rips. Seriously, though, it was a really cool DLC that had a pretty interesting story and a few cool new mechanics that involved fear, which was super fun to play with. And honestly, the fact that the DLC for Syndicate was so good was probably the most surprising aspect of this game.
In a shocking turn of events, where Unity was absolute garbage, Syndicate was not. And I'll be honest, I really do not remember liking this game when I first tried to play it. And I don't think this is a rating anyone was expecting, but I'm putting this right behind Black Flag and S tier. No, I know, it's really that good, especially the 2 DLC packs. Like, the Dreadful Crimes DLC is amazing, and as is the Jack the Ripper DLC. Don't give a fuck about Last Mirage. Don't talk about Last Mirage. We don't need to worry about Last Mirage. But, I mean, the rest of the game is actually, honestly, incredibly well done. And honestly, I feel like this formula was probably the one they should have tried to stick with going forward instead of going to the open world RPG if they were going to stick with the old style formula. But, you know, what could have been, I guess. Syndicate took us 31 hours and 20 minutes for the base game and 10 hours and 21 minutes for the DLC, bringing our total to 41 hours and 42 minutes for the whole game. Which means now our series runtime is at 276 hours. Now, here is where things get interesting, because, as you all may know, open world RPGs are not games meant to be completed in 27 hours, which is what the average game has taken to complete so far. So things will get considerably longer. Also, something to note is that for the open world games, there are both skill trees, which you can spec into, and then also you can change your difficulty. Now, obviously, I'm going to be picking a stealthy / assassin's playstyle, so I'll be picking skills that align with that playstyle, because duh. And I'm also going to be playing the games on normal difficulty, because I feel like that is the most intended experience for the games, and I also don't want to make the games too easy and too hard to, make the play times that different to what they should be, so I'm just going to stick with normal. Now, enough preamble, I'm just going to jump right back into the first open world game.
You are the Magi from Siwa. I thought Magi was supposed to protect the Pharaoh. I am Magi to no Pharaoh. You see this? I can read my own name, Nat! We will find you. We will find you in your sleep! Sleep? I never sleep. I just wait in the shadows, and I will kill you all! Everyone who sniffed the air that day in Siwa!
Origins might still have one of my favorite opening scenes of all time. Also, shout out to Abubakar Salim for being, in my opinion, the best voice actor of the entire franchise. Like, the amount of rage you can hear in his voice is insane, and all of his assassination scenes are so goddamn good. Origins is our first entry into the open world style of gameplay, which of course means new combat, and newish traversal and free running mechanics, which, right off the bat, I already missed the grappling hook from Syndicate because now scaling buildings feels like it takes 80 years, so yeah, that definitely ruined that aspect for me. Combat, on the other hand, is something that is really interesting, because while I do not think it is bad, it does take a lot of getting used to, especially with the timing and spacing of the attacks in this game. You have your shield, 4 different types of bows, 6 different types of melee weapons, 3 different types of tools, but you can only use one at a time, and then you have to change tools by going to your character menu, and overall a decent amount of variation in gameplay if you want it. You can craft upgrades for your breastplate, bracers, quiver, tool bag, and hidden blade, which you are actually able to see visual progression each time you upgrade your gear, which is a feature I really like. Eagle Vision also gets a massive rework, with you now literally having your Eagle companion Senyu communicate with you as she scouts out all the important things you're looking for, such as locations of chests, fort captains, quest objectives, and other important information for each location you visit. Of course, this being an open world RPG, you can find random loot on bodies and chests and get gear as quest rewards, ranging from rare to legendary basic stuff. However, if the point of legendary gear is to be, you know, legendary, unique, that kind of thing, why the hell am I finding duplicates of it? It kind of defeats the whole point of calling it legendary, and besides a few quests with guaranteed legendary rewards, the rest of the legendary drops seem to come from a loot pool, because I'm 90% sure there was a legendary sickle sword that I could have gotten, which I did not see in my entire playthrough after clearing every single chest around the map. The other big new change Ubisoft was able to make when creating this new game formula was really cool and interesting. They basically took every developer into a small room and threatened them at gunpoint to infest the new games with the most disgusting microtransaction shop known to man. Like, what the fuck even is all this, bro? How did you manage to make a single player game pay to win? Jesus fucking Christ! With this being an RPG style, you have a new improved skill tree, with skill trees for Warrior, Hunter, and Seer? The Warrior and Hunter both make sense, but the Seer tree, it feels like they just lumped in whatever they felt like they should along some tool skills, because why am I spending a skill point so I can time skip when I need to? Also, I'll be honest, the lack of actual skill options to help you get around stealthily is really disappointing. You have about 3 skills related to assassination, only one of them actually helps you with assassinating people, the other 2 are just for experience point gain. Which, when your game is called Assassin's Creed, leaves a lot to be desired. Most of the skill options for Warrior are fine. The Hunter skills might actually be the best though, because if you just hard spec into using a Predator bow, you can take out the entire base with just arrows. It's nuts. The formula for the open world games has the map being split up into different zones. Each zone has different outposts and other activities you can finish inside it, which honestly isn't that new of a concept with Assassin's Creed, but now because the map is about 5 times the size, 16 times the size of Syndicate and Unity combined, they now have an excuse to have zones of the map devoid of some quests or even any locations to visit at all, which is honestly really annoying, because at that point, why even bother making the map that big if there's nothing you're going to put there? In Origins, you have the opportunity to do things like hunt creatures in their dens, destroy statues of Ptolemy, stargaze, collect papyrus riddles, which I have to say in this game the riddles are easy enough to follow that doesn't leave you clueless on where to go and need to look up a guide, so thank the gods that fucking Nostradamus wasn't born yet. And then of course you can also explore ancient tombs and fight war elephants, which are kind of an insane fight, and then there are also a few locations to just sit back and rest to get extra skill points. There are also Phylakitai roaming around each zone that act as roaming mini-bosses, which if you take them down they reward you with some legendary loot, so that's a nice bonus. You also get access to the Hippodrome and a Gladiator Arena later in the game, which honestly is a really good experience where you can get some extra money and some legendary gear. Later in the game you also unlock a second Gladiator Arena with a Horde mode if you ever want to do that. Why is there a Horde mode? Great question. Moving on. You also have 2 different types of Gladiator events, one being the basic events, which are a few rounds of Gladiator fights and then a boss fight, and then a second set of Elite Gladiator events, which are just the basic events but a slightly higher level with no significant changes. Why? Great question. Moving on. Like many other Assassin's Creed games, Origins is a story about revenge. When the Pharaoh Ptolemy visits Bayek village in Siwa, the Order of the Ancients captures him and his son Kim, who they actually end up killing. I mean, technically, Bayek kills him by accident, but you know, small details. So of course, Bayek goes on a quest of revenge to hunt down the Order, who is responsible for the death of his son, while also helping the rest of the people in Egypt as he is Medjay. He meets Cleopatra with the help of Aya to track down the rest of the Order as they cause death and destruction in the region. And why the fuck am I Aya on a ship in the Aegean Sea? Brother, why do they keep doing this? Stop throwing me in these random ass time skips which don't include the main character. I mean, at least in this game, Aya's doing it to help get Roman allies for Cleopatra, but Syndicate just kind of throws it in there, and then don't get me fucking started on Unity. I know this is also a way to go, hey look, ship combat is back, but I mean, you can't upgrade the ship, and the combat on the ship itself is dull compared to past entries. And it just feels like filler, especially when it just throws you in the middle of the fucking ocean with no reference where you actually are on the map. Anyways, Bayek, I love as a protagonist. He is strong, full of rage, but you can see in the way he interacts with Khemu, Aya, and his friends and family that he's a deeply caring person and one full of love to give. He isn't just a rampaging murderer hellbent on destroying the Order. He's a rampaging murderer hellbent on destroying the Order with a heart, and I think that's beautiful. I also really like the relationship between Aya and Bayek, and while it doesn't have the same full intrigue or charm as Lisa and Arno did, the one spot of that game that wasn't terrible, and it also comes to an unfortunate conclusion, but not as unfortunate as Lisa and Arno, the chemistry between them really helps fuel the emotions of the story of tracking down the Order. I will say that something that does throw off the vibes of the game is the fact that for a game that has some incredibly serious moments, there are some moments which are a little too unserious. While there were some parts like that in Syndicate, I feel like the vibe shift worked better because Syndicate didn't go too far on either end of the spectrum of being too serious or too unserious. Besides Jack the Ripper, but everything inside Jack the Ripper all had the same cohesive vibe. But in Origins, you have literal scenes of finding people's dead children in the river, and then you're watching three bandits pretend to care about their other friend dying so you can watch them get in this weird slap fight about a ring. It feels like some of the side quests of the game could have been cut out to help the game feel more cohesive. However, I think this game is the absolute peak of assassination scenes. Like, I want you to look at me in the windows of my soul and tell me that this scene is nothing short of insane.
You die easily for a god!
I am nobody. Nobody. But when the son of Ra stands on the mountain and says, do it, it gets done.
Next, you told them to murder!
I am not sorry. Is Bayek Astiwa sorry? I lost my family. You lost your family. We have the right to do anything we want to anyone!
No! We are different! You burnt farms! You killed innocents! You're insane!
Hypocrite!
Yeah!
You can pile up 1,000 dead bodies in front of me. It doesn't change me. The world will burn. The Order won't save it. You will burn with it, Medjay.
May you walk the land of the Duat.
They also did an amazing job at making Ancient Egypt fun and interesting to explore, with a lot of the architecture being beautiful to look at. And also with the time the game is set in, you get a really interesting mix of Greek architecture mixed in with Egyptian, since Greece was an occupying force, and then Roman mixed in on top of that, since the Romans also started occupying parts of Egypt. The color palette is also so vibrant and colorful that it really makes the world feel alive and that much more scenic, especially in cities like Memphis along the Nile. With the open world era, Ubisoft really explores putting a lot more emphasis into longer and more intricate DLCs, for better or for worse. The Hidden Ones DLC was pretty short, not doing anything groundbreaking, but a really decent story exploring Bayek and how he worked to form the Creed of the Brotherhood with Aya a few years after its inception. The Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, however, completely flips what I just said about Hidden Ones on its head. It has random events of Shadow Pharaohs spawning around Thebes and a much bigger area to explore, along with 4 different versions of the Afterlife, which are beautifully crafted and very fun to explore, so long as you don't get completely fucked up by the giant scorpions. Both DLCs also offer a great variety of new outfits, mounts, and some interesting legendary loot. However, we still run into the problem of getting repeats of legendary loot. Overall though, both of the stories were interesting with some really fun twists, and it was really cool to see the gods all talk to Bayek about how his work he does as an assassin is done for the right reasons, which will keep his heart light when it finally comes time to weigh it against the feather of Ma'at.
So, Origins I actually had, honestly, a pretty hard time ranking, because while it is a good game, I just don't know if it's quite great. And while it is, very well done from a technical and design standpoint for the most part, I just don't know how well it holds up to some of its competitors on the list. So with that being said, I think it fits right in the middle of A tier, right in between Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 3, which honestly kind of makes sense because all 3 of those games are the start of their respective eras. I mean, technically Assassin's Creed 1 was the start of the OG era, but small details. Plus, at a runtime of 52.5 hours without the DLC and 70.5 hours with the DLC, we slowly start to see the runtime start to creep up. And while I do like Origins a lot, because, it had a very grounded, real feel, I needed something a little bit more epic. I needed something with a little bit more fight, a little bit more adventure. I needed an Odyssey. So before we get into the rest of the Odyssey review, I wanted to address the people who say that this isn't a true Assassin's Creed game based on 2 things.
One, there's no actual hidden blade in this game, and two, there's no actual mention of you being an assassin really at all in this game. And to those people, I say, fuck you. I will tell you exactly why this still counts as an Assassin's Creed game. One, every single Assassin's Creed game is still based on taking down a secretive society, which continues in this game with the cult of Cosmos. Two, a lot of entries in this series focus on revenge. For Ezio, it's getting revenge for his family. For Assassin's Creed 3, it's Connor getting revenge for his mother and his tribe. Assassin's Creed Rogue even has a story of revenge of, going against the Brotherhood after they sent him to Lisbon and causing an earthquake. And in this game, Cassandra, or Alexios, have the revenge arc of destroying the cult for tearing apart their family. Also, I have been playing these games for 346 hours now, so if I tell you that this counts as an Assassin's Creed game, this counts as an Assassin's Creed game. Do you think I'm here to hear your opinion? I'm the one who says what counts. This is my decision. Odyssey does a few things really well that I like over its predecessor Origins. First, even though we are in ancient Greece, we do not actually have a shield in this game, which was done for the reasons of making sure to keep combat more fast-paced and way more about parrying and dodging, which while it does kind of suck that you don't get to use an iconic Spartan shield, the reasoning actually does make a lot of sense because combat in this game does feel a lot better overall with a bigger emphasis on dodging, parrying, and weaving abilities that we will get into later. Secondly, the gear system has changed a fair bit. You of course have all the weapons staying the same, but now you have item slots for your helmet, chest, bracers, waist, and legs. There are also now legendary gear sets, each set having its own unique bonus. But the best part, don't like how the item set or whatever you're wearing looks? Boom! Transmog. Now you can look however you want based on any gear you've already collected. Shit's amazing. Want to use different gear for brawling fights and a different setup to sneakily kill an entire fort? Boom! Loadout slots. Now you can actually change it so you can do damage during a war battle event. Got a whole bunch of items and gear you don't want to destroy by cluttering up your inventory? Boom! Just in the ship. Now you can collect all the cool gear you want and not have to fill up your inventory completely. Did you accidentally murder 3 or 4 people and now you have to go over each of their bodies to loot them? Boom! Group looting. Saves a ton of time for you and it's just another amazing quality of life feature. Also in this game you have dedicated locations and rewards for finding legendary loot instead of them dropping from loot table, which is a much better choice. As well as legendary chests having really nice ornamentation, which makes them easily identifiable, which is also a really good change. The quest log is a much better interface with much easier ways to track what objectives you're following, and also you can view multiple quest objectives on the map at a time, even if it's not a quest you are tracking, which is a huge upgrade over Origins where you could only track one quest objective at a time. There are also now bounty and contract quests you can pick up from message boards in each region, which have a 24-hour timer, but for the sake of making sure we can actually finish this game, we will not be counting those towards every quest completed since they do refresh. There's also now a bounty system, so if you actually do decide you want to steal from your fellow Greeks, or, murder a few innocent ones, you get other mercenaries sent after you who you have to kill to get rid of. Killing mercenaries also helps you climb the mercenary ranks, with each one you kill helping you climb into a higher tier of mercenary valor. Each tier has its own benefits, such as being able to pay less for upgrading and buying gear at the blacksmiths, and some of these mercenaries also have some legendary gear on them, so even if they are not hunting you down, they can still be worthwhile to hunt down yourself. You also get rid of your bounty by either paying it off or kill whoever is sponsoring the bounty on your head. The skill point system is fairly similar to Origins, with there being 3 different skill trees: a hunter, warrior, and assassin. Assassin has a focus on using your assassin damage in combat, rush assassinating people, and using poison weapons. Warrior has a focus on being in the fray of the battle and coating your weapons in fire, and of course, hunter focuses on using the bow. I like these skill lines a lot better than Origins, as they feel more fitting to their namesake. Each active ability you can get in each tree does have 3 different tiers, each tier making it more powerful. However, you have to upgrade the spear before you can upgrade a skill to its next tier, which I like because it doesn't allow you to get fully overpowered before the end game. And upgrading the spear also gives you more adrenaline gain, more adrenaline segments, and more health gained when you use adrenaline on abilities. And another great feature is that for a small gold cost, you can actually reset your entire skill tree and switch up your build at any time, which is so great that you're not locked into a single playstyle for your whole playthrough. Once you also hit level 70, you get introduced to a mastery point system where you can put your extra skill points into different bonuses, such as extra crit chance, damage, or different stat bonuses. Before we go on to the Greek War system, we will focus on the return of using a ship in naval combat, and while I do admit that the naval combat in this game does not have the same punch as it does in Rogue or even Assassin's Creed 3, it is still pretty fun, as you can actually cleave ships in half by ramming into them, which is super fun, and you can also recruit lieutenants who help you bolster your ship in whatever areas they excel at. So while the system in general isn't as flashy as using cannons and mortars, honestly they still did a decent job, so hats off I guess. Also the crew sings Greek sailing songs with a travel speed, so that's nice to have in the background. Okay, so now we get into one of the two big systems of this game, the first being the Greek War system. So just like with Origins, Odyssey has a lot of different locations scattered around each zone, with some of those locations being military camps, forts, and now leader houses. The rest of the locations we'll get into later. In all locations based around the actual military, you can find war supplies and war chests that you can loot and burn. This will slowly bring down the stability of each zone, and the lower the zone's stability, the more exposed the zone's leader. Then you can assassinate the leader of the zone to trigger a battle, either defending or attacking for Sparta or Athens, depending on which army originally controlled the zone. Defending is easier, but will give you less rewards, while attacking is harder, but gives you more rewards. Within the battles, you have to take out captains of the enemy army until your side wins the battle, and honestly, I think this is a really cool way to make every location still feel like it's contributing towards an overall end goal. The second big system that is introduced in this game is the cultist system. So originally we had the target board in Origins, and then Odyssey cranks it up to an 11 with how it does this. So once you finally get to the big reveal of the cult of Cosmos, there are 7 branches of the cult. Each branch has its own leader, and each leader has 5 people under him. Each cultist has their own clue to their identity you can find with a hint of where that clue is on the target board. For each cult member you assassinate, you get a clue to the leader of that branch of the cult. Each branch leader needs 5 different clues before you can identify them and hunt them down. Each member you assassinate also gets you a new piece of legendary gear and an Isu fragment that helps you upgrade your spear. Then for each of the 7 branch leaders you kill, you will get a clue to the identity of the leader of the cult, the Ghost of Cosmos. And while it is overwhelming how many targets there are first, it is really cool to have such a big board and see how big and influential the cult is. There is, however, one big disappointment I have with this game. There are no death cutscenes when you assassinate someone, and following up on Origins, which has hands down the best assassination cutscenes of the series, the fact that we don't see them at all in this game is a really big letdown. I know for an entire cast of 42 people it would have been a lot, but even for the main 7 cult leaders, it would have been nice, so to not get them at all is just frustrating. The more cultists you kill, the more blood-covered mess you see on the loading screen though, so that is kind of cool. Moving on though, one of the other big changes to come into Odyssey was the introduction of choice. From choosing to play as Alexios or Cassandra, I picked Cassandra because she is canon, which will be important, to a wide range of dialogue choices in the quest design. While most of these dialogue options don't change a lot, there are a few choices that do impact the main story very heavily, which is a choice. I don't think it's necessarily good or bad, but the fact that it does exist in this game is not really needed. I understand wanting to give the player more options to explore and make their Odyssey their own, but it does feel to an extent that it is another factor that really moves away from the main DNA of Assassin's Creed. And of course, with dialogue options comes romance options. Now, being an upstanding individual in 400 BCE, I did what any good woman would do and follow the will of the gods, which, if you know anything about Zeus, means that you basically have sex with anything that has a brain and legs. And oh lord, we did. I will say some of the branching choices and how they affect certain quests are really cool to see, with some quests I did later on in the game being impacted by quests I did hours earlier and did not think would be relevant still mattering at all. So in this way, I am glad that they at least gave it a little bit of impact. Some of the romantic options / side quests in this game are also surprisingly well done, with a couple of the quests actually having a surprising amount of connection and emotional depth. For this playthrough, I did go with the actual canon dialogue and story options for the game, which are actually found in an official novelization put out by Ubisoft, so that actually does help us a lot here. As for the rest of the locations of this game, we of course have shipwrecks, temples, and bandit camps, which have our usual loot and captains carrying over from Origins, and ancient tombs which house our skill points. However, we are also introduced to quite a few new activities. We have the return of the Ostraka riddles, which are fun and get you some neat engraving rewards, and then we get to a whole bunch of hunts, one type being the same in Origins, the other being actual legendary beasts such as the Nemean lion and the Cretan bull. So those were actually pretty cool boss fights to put in the game. Then of course we come to our other hunts in the form of mythological creatures, which, while some may consider it controversial to put in an Assassin's Creed game, I do not care because they are cool. Also, there are humans corrupted by relics of Atlantis, so fuck you, it still counts for lore reasons. As I mentioned earlier, the combat in this game does feel a lot better. You get stun locked a lot less and also feel like you're able to survive fights so much more since you're able to heal and also heal based on how many adrenaline points you use. The lock-on system also feels better. In Origins, it felt like sometimes you would have Bayek look in the wrong direction even when locked onto a target, but in this game it feels a lot snappier, which is really good to see. Odyssey. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but combat in this game also shifts focus to using abilities a lot more. You have an ability wheel for your bow and then 2 ability wheels you can use for your melee and assassin abilities, which is good that you get a lot of choice for it. The bow abilities mean an absolute nerfing of the Predator and light bows from Origins, which is definitely a change for the better, while the melee and assassin abilities have some really nice feel to them. Especially things like the Hero Strike, which lets you do a burst of your assassin damage with your spear, and you can also choose to coat your weapons in either poison or fire to help. Oh, and of course we get the Spartan Kick because, duh, shit rocks too. The story in this game is complicated, but overall I think it is really good. Although it is dependent on if you can hear it, because there is a very annoying bug where sometimes some of the dialogue cuts off so you can't actually hear what was meant to be said. However, you start off with an opening scene as Leonidas fighting against Xerxes with the 300 Spartans, which of course is such a cool scene to open in on. Moving on, you find yourself as a small-time mercenary on the island of Kefalonia, where a local man named Marcos took you in after you were thrown off Mount Taygetos when your baby brother was sacrificed in the mountain and you accidentally threw a priest off the cliff and ran away. After fighting a local crime lord, you were recruited to assassinate your father by a guy named Elpinor. Once you confront your father, he tells you that your mother is still alive and you should go and find her. Oh, also he mentions that he's not actually your father, so that's a whole lot to unpack there. Then we go visit the Oracle of Delphi to try and find our mother, and we learn that the Oracle is actually controlled by a strange cult, who, wouldn't you know it, Elpinor is a part of. So we kill Elpinor, steal his mask and robes, and then infiltrate the cult meeting where we meet Deimos, who, wouldn't you know it, is actually our baby brother. So of course this is just even more insane, and after traveling to Athens in our search to find our mother, we get sent to Argolis, Carinthia, and the Pirate Islands. We find out our mother tried to bring our baby brother to a healer who turned out to be part of the cult, who not only told Melini that he was dead, but then proceeded to torture him so he could become the cult's greatest weapon. Like, Jesus, these are some actual sadistic people, and we met the guy Satan was named after. After gathering all the information, you head back to Athens, which is suffering from the Plague of Athens. Under the panic of the plague, the cult infiltrates Athens, kills Pericles, and then also kills your child's best friend who you had on Kefalonia. So, more children dying. Jesus, they really get heavy with the open world games. With the help of Pericles' wife Aspasia, you realize that your mother fled to Naxos, where you reunite with her and help her lead Naxos to victory over the rival island Paros. And then you both head back to Sparta, but not after she sends you to find your real father, who is Pythagoras? At this point, the story basically spreads into 3 different directions. The first being reuniting your family and reclaiming your home in Sparta, the second being hunting down the entire cultist tree, and the third being hunting down the mythological beasts and reclaiming their relics so you can seal off Atlantis, which Pythagoras has been guarding. So the story itself has a lot to it, but all does a really good job at taking you all over the world and making every zone matter, and even with the 3 zones that don't have any main story associations to them, they are used very well in the first DLC, which we will get into a bit. Cassandra / the Eagle Bearer I think works well as a protagonist. The same way that Bayek was a protector of the people, so it makes sense that's why he's helping the people of Egypt. Cassandra is a mercenary who wants to get paid, so it makes sense why she is taking missions from people. And throughout the story you do see a lot of charm with her characters, with some great back and forth dialogue with characters like Marcos and Socrates. And while you can argue that some of her character's development is built around the choices you make in the game, I do think at the very least with the choices I made in the canon choices in the game, Cassandra is far from boring and shallow. There are also a lot of really great side characters in this game that help your adventure along. You have Barnabas, who is an older, pious comic relief who is always cheering you on. You have Hippocrates, that they wrote incredibly well with the way he looks at healing in relation to how it can be people's own responsibility and not the gods. And you even have Socrates and Alcibiades, who do lead to some very fun, memorable moments in the story. The world building of this series has honestly always been a strong point, and of course I may be biased, but the entirety of the Greek world is so beautifully crafted. Everything is bright and vibrant, with cities like Athens and Sparta having really interesting differences in their color and construction, and even when you're riding from location to location, you can stop and look at the scenery while you listen to the birds calling, with spots from Laconia to Lemnos having incredible views. There are 3 different DLCs for Odyssey, which are The Lost Tales of Greece, Legacy of the First Blade, and The Fate of Atlantis. Lost Tales is really just some extra quests that add some extra story to some of the side characters. It's nothing to write home about, but there are some nice moments you get with the 3 of Herodotus, Socrates, and Barnabas. The other 2 DLCs follow a 3-episode format where each episode takes place in a different area of the game, with each episode having a couple hours of content. I think the format worked well for when it originally released, but replaying it all just kind of breaks everything up instead of it all being cohesive. That being said, especially for Legacy of the First Blade, there are large time skips between episodes, so at the very least the format works from a narrative perspective. Following Origins, Legacy of the First Blade is a story-focused DLC that doesn't really introduce any new mechanics or anything related to the Isu. It marries the plot of Odyssey into the Assassin's Creed lore a little bit more directly, with you meeting the original proto-assassin Darius, fighting one of the earliest iterations of the Order of the Ancients. It's a pretty good story, and you also get a flamethrower on your ship from it, so while it doesn't do anything too crazy, you get some really cool armor and weapons from it. Fate of Atlantis is a whole different story. It involves a bunch of the modern day story, which I've been actively avoiding talking about because I literally do not understand why they tried to make Layla the new Desmond and why the fuck they think it's working, but anyways, once you take the stuff of Hermes Trismegistus Megistus from your father Pythagoras, you need to understand how to wield its power and how to stop it from corrupting you. So a member of the Isu has made simulations in Elysium, Tartarus, and of course Atlantis to hone your power. You are introduced to the new enemies with the Isu guards, obviously the beautiful new areas of Elysium, Tartarus, and Atlantis, and you get a whole bunch of new gear as well as a bunch of Isu inspired gear that drops that looks amazing, and all 3 episodes also come with their own mechanics and storylines. In Elysium, you work with Adonis to rebel against Persephone, who rules the realm, and you learn the mechanics that come with new enemy types as well as new fort objectives. In Tartarus, you work with Hades to make sure that the gates of the underworld are guarded so that none of the dead can escape, and you get a rift mechanic which has you cross over into the Veil of Tartarus to access new areas and take down enemies you normally wouldn't be able to access. This episode and next episode also come with a lot more side quests, which are a nice touch. Episode 3 has you meet Poseidon as he tries to prepare you for being his right-hand man and keeping the peace of Atlantis, where you have to explore Atlantis to find Isu knowledge to power yourself up to make sure you can properly use the staff. The more knowledge you have, the more areas you can access, and you also get to create some custom weapons at the Forge of Atlantis, which is a really nice touch. Also, if I haven't mentioned it at this point, you can also get Hades' axe, which is beautiful. Now, one of the biggest criticisms that I do have with this DLC, as good as it is that it puts everything in a goddamn simulation instead of connecting it to the main world! Like, come on, man! You already had a blueprint for it there with the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC. You're telling me that you couldn't even try to make some secret entrance hidden from the world for millennia into the underworld? That would have been so good, but no. Instead, we have to do this simulation bullshit to connect it to this ass modern day story where all the characters are insufferable and no one has any actual idea of what they're doing or why they're doing this. Part of me feels like this was their original idea anyways because of how many characters you run into from the main game, especially in episode 2 in the DLC when you're in Tartarus, but I'm assuming someone said, we need to make the modern day relevant, and that's where this simulation bullshit came in. At the very least, this DLC was a lot of fun, but I just wish they really gave that little push to put it as an actual part of the game world because that could have made the whole thing perfect. There was also a second free DLC that I somehow did not even know existed up until this point, where you take a vacation to the island of Corfu until you're sought out by Herodotus and Barnabas, who miss you in the adventure you bring. So they push you to work on a fake treasure hunt, which leads to a real treasure hunt, which leads to the spear losing its Isu enhanced power, explaining how it ended up with Herodotus at the beginning of the game. It was a really nice DLC, which was also a nice send-off for the game. It does a good job explaining what Cassandra was doing after the events of the game.
Odyssey will always have a soft spot in my heart. I know it deviates pretty far from the original formula of Assassin's Creed, but in my opinion, the combat, the story, the environments, the pacing is just done at such an exceptional level that it's always going to be one of my favorite games. It always has something to do or some area to explore that just makes it so fun to play in my humble opinion. So all that's left for this review is my own ranking of it, which I know you're not going to like it, but this game is still honestly an absolute top of A tier, and I don't care. It was also the longest game, taking about 84 hours to complete. The base game. Yeah, as much as I love this game, the length is a little not great. The rest of the DLC took 39 and a half hours, which, if you're paying attention, was about the entirety of Syndicate, or, you know, just the base game of Unity. And if you're really paying attention, you would know that that brings Odyssey to about 126 hours and 17 minutes. And the total runtime for the series is about 472 hours and 10 minutes, which means Odyssey takes up about 27% of that. Jesus Christ. A good thing to note, though, is that a lot of the quality of life features were actually made post-launch of this game. So, of course, the developers took this into consideration when making their next game, making it a nice, cohesive, shorter... There are actually a lot of things I do like when you first start getting into this game. Each region now has an actual tracker for everything inside of it, which is split into wealth, which is your basic looting of gear and materials, mysteries, which are all of your world events, and artifacts, which is all of the collectibles such as treasure maps and tattoo designs. This means that instead of quest and objective markers, everything is displayed as gold, blue, and white dots, respectively. The gear system also got a very interesting overhaul.
Instead of gear being randomized drops, there's now specific dedicated gear drops, so each piece of gear you collect is unique, and each piece of gear can be upgraded from common to divine, changing its appearance and how much you can upgrade it, which I think is a great way to make every piece of loot matter. The leveling system has also been replaced by the power system, which we will get into later, but the removal of a leveling system means that all gear no longer has any level requirements, meaning as soon as you find a piece of armor or an axe, you can just start using it right away. The raiding system feels good, and using your horn to call your ship to raid a monastery or even just deciding to raid a village after traversing down the river is a good way to play into the Viking aesthetic. And having to use your crew to force open doors and pry the lids off of treasure is a great way to make the entire experience feel great. Ravensthorpe is actually a really nice home base which you can continuously upgrade as the game goes on, collecting all the raw materials and supplies from the monasteries and towns you raid to build new huts and workstations for your people. You can do some quests as the settlement grows to interact with the people living there and build your relationships with them, which is great. And also being able to bring back Roman artifacts and collect other designs to put around the settlement to help decorate it is really fun. However, there are just so many weird choices in how the game was designed and the direction that they decided to take it, which kind of just makes the whole thing fall apart a little bit at a time. The one thing I will say about this game is that it really gives some insight as to why the whole series has called it Eagle Vision. Because in this game, instead of an eagle, you have a raven, and dear fucking god, this is the most absolute useless bird I've ever fucking seen in my goddamn life. In the rest of the RPG era so far, you've been able to use your eagle to spot quest objectives as well as tag enemies while scouting a fort so you can figure out where to go to infiltrate and sneak around. Your raven gives you none of that. You can't find your objective besides just getting a basic area, you can't find enemies, you can tag and loot keys, and that's quite literally it. And the most frustrating problem about this is I really have no idea why they nerfed the bird as hard as they did. It's not like it was game breaking to be able to see where enemies are, it literally just helped your stealth missions. It's not like it was a bad thing to be able to find the people you need to talk to, instead you just don't get to do that anymore? I don't even know what else to say, it just literally makes the Eagle Vision basically an afterthought. The game has no shortage of activities for you to do, from orlog to drinking contests to river raiding to fishing to hunting to fishing deliveries to hunting deliveries, and it's so many things that even me, who has been doing literally everything in every game, feels like it's too much. I understand wanting your world to be filled with things to do, but when you put so many things in there for you to do, it almost draws away from the main reason people come to your game to play it. Why do I need to find 3 bream, 2 haddock, and 4 pollock and give it to the fisherman? I'm here to hunt down a shadowy order. We don't need all of this here. Moving on, one of the first things I actually noticed is that for some reason, some of the weapons actually do not retain the same size. If you look closely, there are so many weapons that when you're holding them in your hand, they look fine, but when they get holstered, they shrink? I understand wanting to make sure that the weapons you're using look appropriate when you hold them and look better in combat, but why would you do this? In Odyssey, you had a farther back camera angle, and none of the weapons felt too small when you held them. Like, when I take a bow off of my back, you really do not need to make it that much larger. I promise you, it looks fine as it is. And for the weapons like the one-handed hammers and the spears, this effect makes it look even worse. This leads me to my next point. This combat, depending on the weapons you use, ranges from fine to one of the clunkiest, worst feeling combat experiences I have ever felt in my life. In an effort to make each hit feel impactful, there's just a weird delay between each hit that just makes it feel slow and incredibly chunky. And the worst part is that it feels like this on a sword. When you actually swing the hammer, it feels a lot smoother and the hits are closer together, which begs the question of, if you are using a hammer, why does it swing faster and more consistently than a sword? It feels so backwards that I don't even know where to begin with this. Okay, after a bit of digging, I think I actually do know where to begin, and that beginning is going to be in the gear stat system. Your armor has different stats for given health, armor, and resistances, which is pretty standard, and then weight, which affects how much stamina is used when dodging, and evasion, which affects the chance that you get massively reduced damage. Which, okay, nothing crazy right now. Then we get to our weapon stats, which affects the damage you deal with a stun attack, and then the speed, which increases the speed you swing your weapons, and of course, critical chance and damage. Except that crit chance makes no sense because it's a number and not a percentage. Now, listen, I am fine with there being some weird stats on gear in games. I mean, I'm not, but as long as you make it all make sense and make it readable, then it can be excused, but you need to make it make sense. Also, I'm sorry, but having a speed stat is fucking stupid. Because it also means if I put all my points into Raven stats, which affects the speed of all my Raven weapons, and then I try to use a bear weapon, it's gonna feel like shit. And especially when you need to get your players hooked onto your game as early as you can, so you can retain them to play your game, why would you purposely make your combat feel like shit when the player first experiences it? Like everything in this game, it's just a good idea, but bad execution. There is also something I do strongly dislike about the new gear system, and that is the fact that there is no legendary gear. Now, don't get me wrong, I like how gear is done, but removing legendary gear means that picking up new gear just feels a lot less exciting when you pick it up. In Odyssey, it felt really cool seeing a huge ornate chest and opening it to find the Spear of Poseidon, but in this game, when I pick up gear for the Hidden One set, I don't feel any type of excitement or any feeling that I picked up something powerful, and that's a little upsetting. Moving on from the gear system, the power system just feels boring, and just like leveling but with extra steps. Mostly because it is. Instead of being able to spec into abilities from your skills screen, you have to find them in the world in order to actually equip them, which is a fine change, but then when you get to the power system, it just feels like you are putting points into random stat categories just because. The system is split into 3 different zones. The way of the Raven, which is stealth, the way of the Wolf, which is your bow skills, and the way of the Bear, which is your melee combat. Gear is also broken down to one of the 3 different ways, so you can have more specialization in your playstyle. But at the end of the day, most of it just feels unmotivating to spec into. Like, okay, I gain an extra 1.7 ability damage, but is that it? And here is another big problem. So, in Odyssey and Origins, once you hit a certain level, you can start putting your skill points into mastery skills, which I think is great. It allows you to put skill points into damage or stats that you want without actually having to put skill points into the entire system. So, with Valhalla having such a focus on playing how you want, you would think this would follow this formula, right? Right? Because that's what would make sense, right? Of course not! I have to put a skill point into every single skill start in this godforsaken tree before I can literally get any mastery points to put into my mastery skills. And I cannot stress this enough. Who thought this was a good idea? The formula you had for mastery points before was actually perfect for this game. Why did you make it worse? Fucking Christ, I can feel my sanity slipping. And even though I really do like the zone tracking, the one thing I think they messed up with this system is just completely removing locations altogether. Now, for those of you who are confused as to what I mean that besides some icons on the map for raids you can do and dots for wealth, mysteries, and artifacts, there are literally no icons on this map at all besides your home settlements. No caves, no ruins, no camps, nothing besides some villages and settlements. There is next to 0 information on this map that is helpful if you're trying to read it and figure out where you want to go if you just want to explore. You use small dots with labels to represent the cities, but that's also part of my issue. Nothing has character. Everything is just so minimalist, it lacks any type of character. And especially comparing it to previous entries, it just makes the map feel dull. And while I'm here, one more thing about the map. In Odyssey, the map was split into large territories and then split into smaller zones inside those territories. Once you entered a zone, the map would reveal itself so you could look on the map and go, oh, there might be a temple here to loot, and there's a fort over there. But that was also helped by the fact that Odyssey map had color. In Valhalla, the entire thing is just gray. Just like everything else in this game, God forbid you get a quality of life feature that helps you. And I know it is incredibly nitpicky to complain about the color of the map, but when all of the little things pile up into creating a much bigger problem with how the game handles certain systems, it all matters. Following this pattern, we get into how Valhalla handles zone quests. The map has its own zones that become more difficult the farther you go out, needing more power to progress through the map, which is very standard. However, you have to choose which zone you're visiting from your home in Ravensthorpe every single time. So you set out from your settlement to go to each zone and do its story, which is fine enough, except that afterwards, to progress the story, you literally have to go back home after every zone, which while I understand the idea of we've just taken this territory, why are to next, it just makes everything feel so much more disjointed, as it feels like you have to keep backtracking to your start point in order to keep going forward, and on top of that, this means that you can quite literally only do one zone story at a time, kind of killing the idea of being able to go into another zone and stumble upon a quest line there. So for a game that is so focused on making it feel like you're exploring a new land which is yours to conquer, you can, but only one small zone at a time, which you have to get permission to do so first. And while we're still talking about zones, here's something which is pissing me off the further I get into the game. Here I am in East Anglia, which says you should be power level 55 when you get there. I'm currently power level like 92 or something, so you think I should be way over leveled, right? Wrong. Why in the name of sweet baby Jesus am I running into multiple fights which you need to be a power level 164 and one that is level 340 in a zone which is meant for power level 55? Either raise the fucking floor for where the player should be or put the goddamn endgame fights in the end game zones. Now, this is also going to be a really weird criticism, but also feels like I'm leveling too quickly. Halfway through the game, entering zones which are supposed to be power level 160, I'm sitting at power level 270 or something, which I know was a really odd thing to complain about, especially when in Odyssey some of the leveling honestly felt a fair bit slower, but it just feels so weird to be so over leveled at this point in the game. And because this game does not scale enemies to your level, it almost trivializes the combat in the game the deeper into the game you get. On the topic of questing, I want to touch up on the whole world events idea. Because again, it is great in concept. You have little events of meeting people throughout the lands, great beasts and warriors, flaying competitions, agaric mushrooms, stone altars, and animus anomalies, which is great that there are so many world events, except that there is a huge one missing. Side quests. There are no actual meaningful side quests that give you a side story with any memorable moments. In Origins, you had the Son of Ra, who was a bandit leader who his followers worshipped him like a god. In Odyssey, there was a side quest involving all the side characters that felt good to play, and even some side quests like going to Pefka and participating in some fake Minotaur trials that were a tourist trap. But in Valhalla, there is nothing. None of the activities feel any more substantial than the 20 feet of where you find them from, and that just makes them all feel completely trivial. Even in Odyssey, there was a small quest where you could tell a child that she couldn't make friends out of clay and she had to find some actual friends, and when you finish the quest, she's crying, but if you visit her later, she actually does find some friends who make clay sculptures with her, and that's just another touch of what makes that world feel alive. But in Valhalla, the entire world just feels stale and unmoving. Also, these mysteries, if you could even call them that, are some of the most absolute dogshit written quests I've ever had the displeasure of participating in. Why am I helping someone get an eel to make Worcestershire sauce? Why am I helping someone dig through lamb shit for a brooch? Why am I in an archery competition against a fucking guy named Oda Sluggerson, who has a 1950s American accent and apparently attacks people by using a baseball bat and swinging rocks at them, and I'm not making this up. I do not get paid for any of this. I'm just helping them because I want to? What is the point? In Odyssey, everyone says they'll pay you if you help, so you help. In Origins, your job is to protect the people, so you protect. In Valhalla, your job is to bring alliances to your clan, so why the fuck am I literally telling a nun to touch grass and go outside? And yes, that is also a real world mystery. What do I get out of this? I feel like I'm going crazy because there is no reason to care about any of these pedantic, mundane events that have no importance to me at all, especially when one of them is solely written to have an excuse to make a Portal reference that nearly makes me dive headfirst off my balcony. Now, listen, I'm actually happy they did bring the death cutscenes back, but I really do have to say, it feels like every time I'm killing a cult member who isn't really important to the Order, they're just kind of like a bitch. Like, any time in Odyssey or Origins, when you were dealing with the Order, they felt evil, menacing, strong in their convictions, but I swear half the people you hunt down in this game is just, yeah man, I guess I shouldn't have joined the Order. One guy literally said, I joined the Order so I could drink all the meat I want. Like, are you joking right now? We had people in the Order who were killing children by drowning them in rivers and torturing babies to turn them into weapons for the Order, and this is who I'm supposed to be afraid of? It just makes the Order feel weak, and if they got rid of some of these cutscenes, I really think the vibes would have been so much better. And the other disappointing thing about this new Order mechanic is that in the Odyssey you actually had to manually reveal who the members of the cult were, giving at least some air of intrigue to the system, but in this game it just doesn't let you do that. So as soon as you kill all 6 of the lesser members of a branch, it just automatically goes, hey, this guy's the leader of the branch, which also takes away another part of what was really nice about the Odyssey system, is that every cult member had their own voice line when you reveal them. Even details as small as someone going, the waves of the Order will be felt across the world, makes the enemies feel more grandiose, and is something which is sorely lacking in this game. And of course, technical issues are back in a great way. So first of all, yes, Valhalla looks great graphically, but honestly, compared to Odyssey, it just feels so unsaturated and muted that it just feels like the entire point of having better graphics just gets put to waste. I understand wanting things to look pretty, but if the actual environments you are looking at aren't pretty, then why would I bother looking at them? Where in Odyssey you got this sea of deep blues in the background while you fight Spartan shoulders with bright red across their shields and vibrant green grass. Everything is just so nice and colorful and easily distinguishable and bright. Valhalla feels so bleak by comparison. In an effort to make the world feel a little bit more real, it just ends up looking a lot more dull. All the colors just blend together and everything just feels worse to look at. That is, if you can actually look at it properly. Now, I am all for God rays and ray tracing and all of that, but good fucking god, I can't see shit right here. Learn how to angle a camera! Like, there's nothing wrong with showing off some cool sunbeams, but does it have to be directly in my fucking corneas? I would say I'm better off staring at the ground, except for some reason sometimes when you look at the ground, the textures glitch out in a way that can only be described as the world not knowing what to do with itself and just giving up? Like, I was sitting perfectly still, just rotating this camera. What is happening right now? And I am unhappy to report that this will happen constantly unless you set your FPS limit to 90 FPS, making the fact that you can unlock your FPS useless. There's also this super weird graphical issue that you can see sometimes where you can just look at the ground and it just vibrates. That's the best way I can describe it. It just looks super weird. And that's just the graphical issues. Because sometimes the combat gives me headaches I can't even begin to describe. And this is all on top of Valhalla being by far the most unstable game of the entire franchise. I've definitely seen a few crashes in the franchise, but honestly it was maybe a handful over the entire series up until this point. So when I crashed within my first couple play sessions of this game, I thought to myself, something tells me I should keep a counter of this. And by God, my gift of foresight is upsetting. I crashed a total of 21 times in my entire playthrough, with 3 of them happening in the same night. I think I really do not need to elaborate on why that's a bad thing, but of course we have a strong point with the story, right? Right? The story starts off with you as a young Eivor unifying her father's clan with another when they are attacked by a rival clan by a leader known as Kjappe the Cruel, who mercilessly slaughters your whole village. You then run away and are attacked by a wolf who scars your neck, which is why everyone mainly refers to you as the Wolf Kissed. After the attack, which leaves your parents dead, you are taken in by Sigurd's father, King Styrbjorn, and then 17 years later, Sigurd has come back from his voyage away from home, visiting lands such as Constantinople, where he met Basim and Hytham, 2 members of the Hidden Ones who joined Sigurd on his voyage back home to kill Kjappe, who turns out to be a member of the Order of the Ancients. With the help of Basim, Hytham, Sigurd, and some outside help from King Harald, you cripple Kjappe's forces and then assault his fortress and you kill him in a duel. After the assault, you learn that Sigurd's father actually plans to give his crown to Harald, which is why he aided you in the assault in the first place. Sigurd, of course, feels betrayed by this, and as an act of defiance, you and loyalists to Sigurd from the clan set sail to England to forge a new kingdom for yourselves. But not before you visit the seer and have a vision in which she says you are destined to betray Sigurd. Anyways, you land in England and create the village of Ravensthorpe, and now your journey is about making new allies across England to make sure your new kingdom can thrive. So, for most of these reviews, I've been trying to keep my notes on the story as basic as possible, following usually just the main premise to avoid any spoilers. However, I actually am breaking that rule for this game because I need to explain the entire story so that you all understand how little it seems to make sense. So once you get to England and start going to make your alliances, things are going well. Of course, I'm not a fan of how these zone quests are so disjointed and disconnected from one another that feels like there's quite literally no relation, but I'm going to put a pin in that for now. Once you meet up with Sigurd for the second time, and let's keep in mind that Sigurd is the man you call your brother and have shared all your glory with, and you have followed each other to the ends of the earth. After he goes to Exenfordshire with Basim, all of a sudden that's turned on its head, and Sigurd all of a sudden just decides to share literally no information with you, puts all of his trust into what Basim is telling him, and gaslights you into thinking you are the one being an asshole, all because Basim is telling him some shit of him being a direct descendant of the gods? So then you follow him to find this Isu artifact, which leads to Sigurd being taken as a prisoner because he ran his mouth too much about possibly being a descendant of Tyr. Mind you, all of this is happening while you go back to the seer and take some weird acid mushroom mix and have weird hallucinatory dreams about being Odin trying to avoid your death at Ragnarok, and now Odin just appears throughout your adventure like a weird devil on your shoulder, but I digress. You chase down Falke, she leaves you Sigurd's severed arm as a gift to show you that she's torturing him, and then you assault Falke's fortress to find Sigurd and bring him back, only for Falke to say that Sigurd is a god reborn, or a Isu reborn, I guess. And as traumatized as a man can be from having his sword arm cut off, Sigurd believes it too. So while you go make more alliances and Sigurd becomes more unhinged, you take more acid, go to Jotunheim, and find a magical mead that will allow you to become reborn and escape your fate of dying in Ragnarok for the low price of sacrificing your left eye. And as long as you remember to set your FPS limit to 60 frames a second, you can also have a visual mess of a boss fight with Sif from Wish.com, where you also betray Tyr so he loses an arm, but hey, now all of the Aesir gods are tied to the World Tree for reincarnation, so that's all well and good. Fast forward to after you, for some reason, help your blacksmith and his new wife during an early iteration of Halloween, which ends with you going to Burning Man. Sigurd claims to know how to get into Valhalla without dying, so you travel back to Norway, watch Sigurd call his father a drunk little bitch, and then you try and find Yggdrasil, which turns out to be an insane Isu temple thing, where you can go inside it and just be inside simulations for all time. You and Sigurd enter the machine, which puts you inside Valhalla, which turns out to be a simulation of Valhalla. You defy Odin, leave the machine, and then Basim shows up out of nowhere and he starts trying to rock your shit because apparently you're the one who killed his son. Which makes no sense unless you unlock this super cool top secret cutscene, which shows that those acid dreams were just weird hallucinations of the real Isu events that show that the Isu actually did create rebirth technologies, so Sigurd really is Tyr reincarnated, you are Odin reincarnated, and Basim is Loki reincarnated. So once you trap Basim in the machine, for some reason in the real world you would come to the conclusion that you need to slow down the machine because it's trapping all the Earth's heat in a magnetic field or some shit. So then you go there, Layla for some reason joins the simulation, only to have Desmond Miles' consciousness somehow inside the machine, which you join. Basim somehow gets out, and then his wife was the weird Isu soul in the staff. So now we just have a reincarnated but not really reincarnated Loki walking the Earth. Oh, and then you still have to go back in the Animus as Basim and take down the Order and finish the rest of this game. What the fuck is this pacing? Oh my fucking god. On top of the story being that, there are a couple big criticisms I have with Valhalla. The way it tells story and how it handles choices. Like Odyssey, Valhalla gives you the opportunity to have branching dialogue options and make choices that affect the story. Or at least that's how the game wants you to feel. In reality, besides a few spare choices that you can make, which literally only happen inside your settlement, as far as I'm aware, none of the choices you seem to make in the game have any type of impact whatsoever. Now, I think the reason for this is twofold. One, because the game gives you a map that you can choose where to go. You can technically do zones in whatever order you want to a degree, which is a major problem when it comes to both story pacing and making everything flow together. Because you can choose which zones you want to do, you can go to some zones which have huge impact on the story, and then go to 3 zones in a row which just don't have any relation to the main story in any way, shape, or form. Which is just so bad that it takes any win you might have had directly out of your sails. And because of this, the choices you make inside those specific zones can only have consequences in their directly related quests, meaning that for the rest of the game, they have no impact at all. So really, it just makes the fact that there are choices you can make completely inconsequential. Assassin's Creed also has a really good reputation for side characters, in my opinion. In basically every entry of the series, you can point to a few key side characters or villains as integral to the story and experience of the game, and it is part of what makes this series so fun. And in Valhalla, I cannot stress enough how complete and utter ass these side characters are. Let's put aside the fact that the entire story you basically are just made out to be second fiddle to Sigurd, so there's this really weird dynamic where he leaves you in charge when he's not there, but then when he returns you lose all your power in the settlement until the story is over, and then there's a large chunk of the story where you're really just trying to find your king, but anyways, none of the side characters are really memorable, and if you do remember them, they're not likable. Basim I do think has some interest and intrigue to him, but that's also because he's tied to the main story incredibly heavily and also is the protagonist for the next game, but I'm just getting ahead of myself. You have one side character, Dag, who has a stick up his ass the whole game about the fact that Sigurd left you in charge of the clan, so he takes opportunity to just tell you to fuck yourself any chance he gets. And then you have characters like Ivar Ragnarsson, who could have been likable if they just had any sort of charm to them, but their whole personality is just liking the heat of battle and nothing else. He's not that witty, he's not that fun, he's just kind of annoying in these quests you do see him in. And I'll be honest, it really doesn't feel like any of these characters are characters. A lot of them feel lifeless, with not a lot of thought or even real effort put into the delivery of some of their lines. It just feels like everyone was kind of calling it a day. And that brings me to my thoughts on Eivor. I don't know if it's the fault of the story or the god-awful world mysteries or the fact that Odin is just injected into every pivotal moment and cutscene she has, but I think in terms of protagonists, she's a weaker one. There are moments where I think she's really strong, but for the most part, there really isn't a lot to her. The delivery of her lines is very monotone, and it really does not feel like she has a wide range of emotions. Like the rest of Valhalla, I can see the vision, I can see where it does work, but I just do not think it goes as far as it could have in making a main character that I enjoy and care about. Especially when it comes to characters like Bayek and Ezio, you can see their range of emotions and how it drives them into taking down their enemies, but with Eivor, you really just don't feel that same drive to take down the Order or even to help her clan that much, and it really is disappointing. So for DLC, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has a lot to get through, with some being base game additions, some being DLCs, and one being marketed as an actual expansion, so we're just gonna get right into it and push through. I'm going to start with the river rating because it's a base game edition that can be accessed the earliest. It's basically just a rating system for the main game, but speedrunning it through a few river systems in England, Ireland, and France. You hit as many small camps and forts as you can. The more you hit, the higher the defenses of that river gets, and you can alternate which rivers you raid so that the defenses of the river you just hit go down over time. You can also find armor sets and new weapons in these rivers, which is a nice addition, so that's all well and good. You can also now customize your own Yomes Viking, which you can take on these raids. The more successful raids you do, the more they level up, and that's the basic gist of it. Light, fun. Of course, you can ask yourself why this was put in the game in the first place, but I mean, we already know it's because this game somehow is less focused on it being an assassin than Odyssey, but hey, I'm definitely not getting bitter or resentful of this game or anything like that. Especially when after the first couple raids, the entire thing is just a loop, which really has no differing factors to it at all, and you just kind of do the same thing over and over again, with the only thing changing being the rivers you go down. And since I have to get every single piece of armor and upgrade my ship, that includes the ship upgrades you have to do for this mechanic, and also all the armor you have to buy from this specific shop, so there was that. Next, we move on to the Tombs of the Fallen, which are a few puzzle tombs spread throughout England, which give you a nice armor set and some weapons. Nothing bad, nothing crazy, decent enough. Were they some decently challenging puzzles? Yes. Did have literally no connection to the main game in any way? Also yes. Next, we move on to Mastery Challenges, which are basically mini levels where you're given a specific set of gear and parameters in order to complete the level. Trying to get as many points as possible, and seeing as I'm going for 100% completion, I had to get gold in all of these challenges. Were some of them cool? Yes. Was I wondering why these are even in Assassin's Creed because no other game has done this and it makes no sense for them to be here? Also yes. Did it infuriate me to no end on some challenges that the enemy AI would randomly switch the way it behaved to a situation every third or fourth run, and also sometimes for no reason gave the vision of a sniper in Afghanistan, which may have to repeat one of the challenges over and over again? Also yes. Oh, and by the way, you also do all of this to fight the descendant of a Valkyrie who was Freya's lover and wrongfully imprisoned by Odin, who has basically done this as a blood feud. I don't know what's going on either. Next, we move on to our first actual DLC, The Wrath of the Druids. You get a letter from the King of Dublin, which for some reason is your cousin, so you go off to Ireland to help him secure his kingship under the new High King Flann. This leads you helping Flann with battles with other kings to secure his kingdom, as well as taking down an evil druidic cult called the Children of Danu, who are trying to undermine Flann. The DLC also has its own internal trading system, having to liberate trading posts in order to accumulate different types of materials to complete trade contracts, which is decently interesting. Completing contracts grants Dublin renown, as well as some contracts unlocking different armor sets, so naturally you have to complete every trade contract. You also get some Trials of the Morgan and the usual points of interest from the mainland of England, and enemies who do have some decent variety, with there being druid enemies who can shapeshift, breathe fire, use poison, and of course use sickles, which are a new weapon type introduced. The DLC was fine. Overall, the story was decent enough. It was a bit short, but we'll get into that later. The trading system was also a nice addition, but besides that, the DLC didn't really do anything that amazing or groundbreaking. And even compared to other story-focused DLCs in the RPG era, it still comes up a bit short, in my opinion. Also, really quickly, I still have no idea why werewolves just, exist in this DLC with no follow-up explanation to it at all. No Isu influence or anything to explain it. There's just straight-up werewolves in Ireland. Okay. Next, we move on to the Siege of Paris, where you are visited by a Dane and a Frenchman who request your aid in getting revenge on King Charles the Fat, who has been gaining power in France and murdered the previous Jarl of their clan. You then journey to France to join forces with the new Jarl Sigfred, who is driven by a blood-hungry revenge against Charles. First, you try to make a deal with Charles, but obviously that falls through and you have to, you guessed it, siege Paris. Also, there's a weird Christian zealot cult you gotta take down. The DLC also introduces a rebellion system, which is pretty straightforward. Do missions to help the rebellion against King Charles, gain infamy. The higher in the infamy, the more access you have to new armor, weapons, cosmetics, and upgrades to the rebel squads who help you during your rebellion contracts. Now, first off, my horse is in an open field, why can't I gallop? Now for everything else. Siege of Paris also introduced assassin opportunities similar to Unity and Syndicate, allowing you to look around your surroundings and trying to find a way to get close to your target with some unique kill opportunities. Now, this is not nearly as fleshed out as it was in either of those games, and that really is just kind of the theme for this DLC. Nothing really feels fully thought out or even just had a full effort put into it. Besides some decent showings of growth in how Eivor thinks and acts and another new weapon type and size, the story is honestly weak, with writing sometimes being glaringly bad, and even the bugs and game performance in this area are worse than usual. This entire section of the game just feels disappointing, especially because this was the second paid DLC that they released for Valhalla, and also the second time we have gone to Paris, and also the second time I've been disappointed by Paris. Everything here just feels boring, and I don't really know what else to put here, so let's move on. Next, we move on to the third DLC for this game, which is the first time we see a third piece of DLC for an AC game, The Dawn of Ragnarok. After having some weird visions, which I think are supposed to be relived memories because of the bullshit of how this game handles the weird Isu rebirth thing, we sit beneath a tree and dive back into the memories of Odin, who for some reason they keep calling Havi, and I know this does not matter at all, but it annoys me. Odin's son Baldur has been captured by Surtr, so we travel with my ex-wife / Baldur's mother Frigg to go into the dwarven realm of Svartalheim to save him. After we find Baldur, we confront Surtr, win the fight, but then get thrown into a lost scripted cutscene, watch Frigg get her shit rocked in and killed in front of us, and then wake up to some dwarves who help us and give us a gift which leads us to our first new mechanic of this DLC, the Hugarip. The Hugarip allows you to gain possession of the power of some of the enemies you kill, so if you kill a Muspelheim warrior, you can take on the power of Muspelheim, gaining the appearance of a Muspel, becoming able to walk on lava, and having immunity to fire damage. There are 5 different powers in total, which is a decent variety, and honestly does make the mechanic interesting enough. If this wasn't obvious already, the whole DLC takes place in the realm of Svartalheim, which is like 3 times as big as the last 2 DLCs combined, and also seems to have way more to offer in terms of what you can do in the overworld. On top of introducing another weapon type in the Atskir, you also get the ability to now upgrade your armor and weapons to divine quality, new upgrading systems and materials for your new Hugarip, dwarven hideouts to seek out, and a lot more offered in new artifacts, weapons, armor, and world mysteries, which honestly makes my problem with them worse. I'm supposed to be the Lord of Asgard, the most important god in the 9 realms. So why the fuck am I putting treasure behind a waterfall to be repaid in gratitude? It's such bad writing, man. The arenas from Odyssey and Origins now finally make their comeback behind a paywall. You unlock new stages of the arena by progressing through the story of Svartalheim, and you can find different boasts as artifacts in the world. Each tale has its own set of enemies and conditions, but you can also modify the difficulty of the tale with boasts. Boasts are different combat conditions which make the arena harder by adding things such as enemy stun resistance, making you drunk, and so on. The more boasts in your tale, the harder it is. The Valkyrie running the arena also has her own shop, which has armor and some weapons I need to acquire, because I need that for my 100%. God damn it. Next up, we get back to our free DLC, this time in the form of story packs, our first one being The Fated Encounter. A seer friend of Valka's comes to the settlement and says you're fated to help save the settlements on the Isle of Skye from nightmares that have been plaguing the people. And then for some reason Valka says Randvi, who is Sigurd's wife, who you can choose to fuck, is somehow responsible for this. As this makes no sense, you go to the Isle of Skye to see the problem and help the people there. The overworld is smaller with the same basic activities and a couple of new items that look oddly familiar, but I can't put my finger on holy shit, we got Cassandra back, let's go! The story acts as a continuation of where Cassandra left off after the events of Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the reasons for her traveling all over the world. It was a short little story, but it was nice, it worked well enough, and honestly, that's more than okay with me. Our next free DLC is The Forgotten Saga, which sends us back into an acid trip dream state to play as Odin in a roguelite mode? So, the story justification is that you journey to Helheim to release Baldur, whose soul has been imprisoned there. Sure, I guess that works. And then every time you die, since you've drunk the special mead that are now tried to Yggdrasil, you can come back to life and just keep going through Helheim. Alright, fair enough. The mode has 4 different zones, each zone has a different boss you can fight at the end of it. The first area has a pool of bosses and the rest of the areas do not. There's a skill tree not tied to the base game you can level up with materials you gather through runs, and on your runs you can find chests that give you a random ability, piece of gear, or rune. Abilities can do one of 4 different damage types, which enemies now have weaknesses to, and runes can give you an extra stat bonus. All basic stuff, the mode is done well enough. I just have 2 tiny little criticisms for this DLC. One, even though luckily the game autosaves after each encounter, while you are in this mode, you can literally not manually save your game at all, even before you start your run, which frankly I think is stupid. And 2, and I think this is the most important one, what the fuck is a roguelite mode doing in an Assassin's Creed game? What else am I even supposed to say here? Like, the mode's fun enough, I guess, but this is so far removed from what the series is that I don't even know if there's anything else to say, but it just doesn't belong here. If you want to make a roguelike game, just fucking make a different game. Don't tie it to your cash cow piggy bank. Fuck fuck, man? For the 100%, I just made sure I completed one full run of the story arc, all the small side quests inside the realm, and just got all the gear from the store at the end. Our next free DLC is the Shared History DLC, which, like the Fated Encounter, is a small story pack where Eivor meets up with a hidden one named Roshan, who you help take down her target by assassinating someone who is trying to disguise his crew as your clan. It's literally a single quest that takes about 20 minutes, so I don't have much to say here besides that it's a small nod to Mirage, which you also get a pretty cool looking armor sets as well, so that's always nice. And finally, our last free DLC is the Last Goodbyes DLC, which takes place a few years after all the events of the main game, and offers a glimpse into the events of how some characters in Eivor get a send-off, while Eivor wears a fuck-ass outfit, which of course is a texture bug. You see Hytham training members of the clan as Hidden Ones, and Aelfried reclaiming his throne in Wessex as Eivor says her goodbyes and prepares to leave England and journey to North America, where we find her body in the modern day. And with this, Valhalla finally comes to an end. There are not enough words in the English lexicon to describe what this game has done to me. So I'm going to use the Greek one instead.
Αυτό το παιχνίδι μου έδωσε αρκετούς λόγους για να εισβάλλω στη Ubisoft Montreal και να κρεμαστώ στο λόμπι τους.
From the way I talk about this game, I think it's pretty obvious that this will be the longest runtime of the entire series. With the base game coming in at about 81 hours, and I'm actually lying to you, that's the length of the DLC. The length of the actual base game is 95 hours, 41 minutes, and 15 seconds. This game took 176 hours and 41 minutes to complete. D. Bottom of D. It's obviously not the worst game ever, but from a foundational and technical standpoint, combined with a horrific runtime, it's exactly where it belongs. If Odyssey is too long, Valhalla is comparatively a millennia of pain and torment. I have nothing else to say. Moving on. So Mirage was actually first developed to be another large DLC for Valhalla, but eventually became bigger in scope to the point where they actually deviated and made it its own title in Assassin's Creed Mirage. This is also a game that Ubisoft touted as a return to form for the series, announcing the return of features like pickpocketing and a much larger emphasis on stealth. However, these are the same people who put a goddamn roguelite mode in the last game, so we will see how far those promises actually go. The first thing I will actually give credit and praise to is the gear system for Mirage, because instead of Valhalla and to a lesser extent Odyssey, where you have 5 armor slots, a bow, 2 melee slots, and 9 different weapon types and 2 types of shields for those slots, Mirage has a whopping total of 1 armor slot, 1 sword slot, what's a sword? 1 sword slot, and 1 dagger slot. There are also slots for your costume and talisman and a die, but besides a couple sequences with the costume mattering, they do not affect gameplay. And I think this is great. It is by far the least weapon variety since I think the OG Assassin's Creed, and I think this is exactly what was needed. Not to say that I don't think weapon variety is good, but I think it was getting entirely out of hand, and this reset of the amount of weapons in the game is a great direction. The actual gear itself is also honestly really well done. Everything looks really good, and the game offers a lot of customization to your character without having to sacrifice any stats or playstyle. The combat itself is a little tricky to get used to since it is a lot different than Valhalla and Odyssey. Your swings are a little slower with a lot of emphasis placed on dodging, parrying, and in general counterattacking, and less about just brute forcing your way through combat, since quite a few enemies don't get interrupted by your swings. However, I think this approach actually works really well because it focuses a lot more on dueling combat and makes you actually feel the need to run and escape when you have more than 3 to 4 enemies surrounding you, which I think helps you feel a lot more like an assassin and less like an unkillable god. This also helps the entire gameplay experience feel a lot more grounded, shifting away from abilities which make you feel incredibly overpowered. I stand corrected. Okay, besides that, the whole combat and gameplay loop is infinitely more grounded. Two other features I want to talk about quickly because I do like them a lot. The first is pickpocketing. It finally makes a reappearance and it has a little timing minigame, and I think this is great. It gives you options to not kill people, and it reintroduces another sorely missed stealth aspect the series lacked in Odyssey and Valhalla. The second is actually the fact that missions and contracts in this game can be replayed. Whenever you finish a mission, you get a replayable mission in the investigation screen called an animus sequence. Animus sequences are replayable story missions and contracts, but this time with extra side objectives. These side objectives are part of a larger reward structure, so that the more side objectives you complete, the more rewards you get, such as some resources, gear, skill points, and even color filters from games like Unity and the original Assassin's Creed, which I think is a really fun unlock reward. I am glad replayable missions are back, as it was definitely a staple of the older titles. However, I think the fact that every sequence has the challenge of not using your eagle vision is stupid. While the eagle vision can help make sure you can find your targets, the fact that you can't use a staple feature of these games to beat these missions is frustrating, to say the least. Another frustrating aspect is that while I understand the ability to quickly take out a throwing knife and throw it at the guy about to detect me is useful, on a mission where I can't kill anyone and I already have my sleeping dart out, just let me keep my dart in my hand instead of accidentally throwing a knife into someone's eye socket by accident and ruin my whole run. It made me restart a few missions way more often than I had to. Before moving on to the world, I want to touch up on the last few systems that relate to the player, which is your skill tree and your tools. Let's start with the skill tree. 3 branches, 24 skills in total. The deeper you go into each tree, the more skill points cost. Simple, direct, no skills which are over the top. Good. No complaints. Next, we move on to the tools, which, while a little bit more complicated, I wouldn't say by much. Excluding your torch, you have 5 tools, such as your throwing knives and smoke bombs. You can upgrade your tools to the hideout, each tool having 3 tiers of upgrades you can choose from. You can choose 1 upgrade from each tier, unless you get a couple skills which give you an extra upgrade from the first tier. Again, short, sweet, not overly complicated, and a system I like. While Mirage is still in the RPG era, the map really does put a lot of focus on being in the city of Baghdad, besides a few missions in the wilderness surrounding it. And that little emphasis means that a lot more touch and care was put into the city and the ways you can actually free run through it. While it was fun being able to scale the walls before in Odyssey or the mountainsides in Valhalla, literally just being able to run from rooftop to rooftop along beams and ropes was something I felt like I had not really felt since even Assassin's Creed 3 to an extent. You did have some decent sequences of free running in Black Flag and Rogue for sure, but in Unity, the rooftops were so close together that there was almost never ropes, if that makes any sense, and in Syndicate, a lot more emphasis was placed in using the grappling hook, and being able to free run like this absolutely helps you appreciate the gorgeous city of Baghdad in its golden age. Speaking of Baghdad, it is full of activities to keep you occupied, with gear chests, enigmas, which are this game's treasure maps, tales of Baghdad, which are this game's world mysteries, but honestly a little bit more insightfully done since you actually have a reason to be helping these people and the writing is better done, and some other activities like treasure pickpocketing. And while there are more than enough of these activities to keep you looking around for something to do, it is far from overwhelming, and as long as you're using your eagle and synchronization points, luckily nothing is too hard to find. Which, now that I say that, I nearly forgot, the eagle is fucking useful again. Once again, you can actually use your eagle to mark guards and find quest objectives, which is honestly a blessing because it really does make it that much easier to be able to know what you're looking for. Oh, and another useful thing in this game, there is a notoriety system, but posters are back. You can tear down posters again to lower your notoriety, and it is a little bit of nostalgia that I absolutely adore. For quests, we have some side quests in the form of contracts. Inside the bureau, you can pick up contracts such as assassinating a target, rescuing a target, or stealing an item. Each contract grants you different rewards, such as new gear, skill points, or a new feature of this game, power tokens. Power tokens are interesting, and the best way I can describe them is that instead of the OG series where you pay coins to hire abandoned mercenaries or thieves to do your work for you, you use these power tokens instead, which can help you with quest objectives by giving you distractions or blending opportunities to sneak around. As for quests in general, instead of having a dedicated quest screen, we transition to an investigation board. The board shows all your open cases, with some cases contributing to a larger investigation, such as uncovering a member of the Order or aiding an ally to the Hidden Ones. Different cases can be connected to each other, and it has a layout which kind of reminds me of the Templar Order tab in Assassin's Creed 2, where it has all these branches which connected to the leader of the Order. It does stray a bit from the traditional quest screen, but in general, I think that it's an interesting way to let the player look at what is going on and see how the different quests contribute to objectives, and also see how everything does connect to each other. The story for Mirage is interesting, since we play as a side character from the last game, Basim ibn Ishaq. You start your journey as a member of the local Thieves Guild outside of Baghdad in a town called Anbar, where you are already regularly doing contracts for the Hidden Ones, and desperate to prove yourself and join their ranks, you try and steal an important shipment from the Caliph of Baghdad, which turns out to be an Isu artifact that the Order of the Ancients had placed in the protection of the Caliph. Of course, the job goes wrong, and your partner in crime ends up actually killing the Caliph, and then in retribution, soldiers actually burn down the guild and slaughter everyone who was there. In your grief, you leave Baghdad behind and are invited into the ranks of the Hidden Ones by Roshan, which you might remember from that quest I talked about in my Valhalla review. In the hideout of Alamut, you are trained in the ways of the Hidden Ones and are finally initiated before you learn that the Order of the Ancients has taken over Baghdad. With your mentors Rehan and Roshan, you journey to Baghdad to take down the Order and regain control of the city. This game and the story in general is much shorter than our last few entries, but I think that's fine. With the way the investigation board works, it makes it really nice to be able to piece together how all of your different cases contribute towards the larger end goal of taking down the head of the Order, and everything honestly blends together really nicely in a way I did not expect. And I will also give credit where credit is due. The story actually had a really interesting ending that I did not wholly see coming, and it was really cool to see it all play out. Basim as a protagonist I originally had some mixed feelings about, but after a while he did grow on me. And I think this is because he's not a larger than life character like Ezio, he's not a brooding character like Eivor, but Basim comes across a lot more measured and genuine. There is a good range of emotion that you can feel through the delivery of his lines, and you get some good dialogue with Basim which shows that he cares about the people he works with and protects, and sometimes even how his mind works and pieces things together when you are doing your investigations. He doesn't try to be over the top funny or stone cold serious, he feels just more human, and I think that works really well here. Which, on that note, for any investigations involving assassinating someone from the Order, I think the game does a really good job of recreating the Unity and Syndicate formula of being able to create your opportunities to kill your targets. You are able to gather information in a variety of ways and create a few different openings to take down your target, which I think is perfect in capturing the essence of what the series was missing. Not to mention that, of course, we do have death cutscenes in this game, which are well done because there aren't 40 of them, and they also give a nice insight to a nice subplot of Basim being haunted by a genie. So, because this game was supposed to be a DLC, we were lucky enough to not get any DLC or extras for this game, making it short and sweet. At least that was the idea until Ubisoft decided to release the Valley of Memories DLC not only over 2 years after the game was released, but after another entire game and DLC for that game was released. Anyways, the story of the Valley of Memories is that you are actually in search of Basim's father, who was originally banished when Basim was a child. You journey to Aula with Derwish, who is your caretaker, looking for your father Ishaq, while also fighting a faction called the Robbers, who have a chokehold on the region. The DLC comes with some more contracts, some songs you can play, and some treasures you can collect, and a couple pieces of gear. The story of the DLC did tie in surprisingly well to the main game, and was intriguing enough that I was not annoyed by it, so hey, that's always a plus.
Now, I know at the beginning I was expecting Mirage to be a disappointment, but it was actually a breath of fresh air I did not expect. Mirage was able to bring back a simpler formula, which focused a lot more on story and intrigue, and in general was just a well done, polished game. As for the runtime, Mirage is obviously shorter by the RPG standards, coming in at just under 21 hours for the main game and 4 hours and 46 minutes for the Valley of Memories DLC, for a whopping total of 25 hours, 45 minutes, and 38 seconds. So, for the more anticipated question is, where do I rank Mirage? And shocking even myself, I'm gonna put it right in the middle of A. Now, it's not perfect as a game, but there's actually a lot here that it does really well, and I think it deserves flowers for that. The series runtime is now at 675 hours, 5 minutes, and 8 seconds. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the end is finally in sight. As we move on to Shadows, we can finally start to put the question to rest of, are the RPG games better than the old ones? And I can finally play Expedition 33.
Shadows was a game I was wary of, given the slog of a game that was Valhalla, and also because feudal Japan was a setting that had been asked for since the series began. Because, well, assassins and ninjas kind of go hand in hand. So when Shadows was officially announced, it was extremely hyped up, and no one was at all upset about this announcement, as there was no content in this game people would get mad about, surely. What was I saying? Oh, right, the review. Also, very quickly, I want to touch on something that I think is really cool, and that is actually the immersion setting of this game, which actually puts the characters in the non-animus translated language that they are speaking. And I think this is super sick, and I'm glad they put this in here because I love being able to hear the characters speaking the languages that they're actually supposed to be speaking during these conversations, and I can't believe we didn't get this sooner.
私も言葉がわかります。
バリニャーノ、わしをたばかりおったな。
Moving on, the first obvious thing is that Assassin's Creed Syndicate walked so that Shadows could run. You get to play as two different protagonists in this game, who are Naoe, a shadowy shinobi from the EGOT region, and then Yasuke, who is the retainer samurai of Lord Oda Nobunaga. While Edie and Jacob varied a little on their focus of combat and stealth, Shadows turns it up to an 11, with Naoe being very much a stealth-focused character, and Yasuke being an absolute powerhouse in open combat. And in order to make them feel even more unique in their playstyles, Ubisoft did add certain actions that only that character can do. For example, Naoe can free run, climb all around the castle, and do all these cool backflips and shit to move in the shadows, and Yasuke cannot. Yasuke can literally barge into a castle and use a goddamn musket to blow someone's shit smooth off, and Naoe cannot. There is a little more nuance to it than that, of course, but that is the basics of how there is a really strong emphasis that these characters have two distinct playstyles. And honestly, I really think that they did a great job at making them feel different from one another and balancing them out to be really powerful in their own ways. And while we talk about their differences, I have to bring up that Naoe does get a grappling hook in this game, which is huge. While it is far from as OP as it was in Syndicate, it is super helpful in being able to climb up castles, but the fact that you can also use it to swing across areas adds a whole new level of level design that makes it feel great whenever you get the chance to use it. The gear system is closest to Mirage, I would say, with one slot for your headgear, one slot for your body, a talisman slot which does have stats this time, and then two different weapons slots. And this is totally fine. It gives you the ability to still mix and match a couple pieces you like, but also doesn't overload the gear drops you can get throughout the game and makes things a little simpler in terms of the overall choices you need to make. And I think this is a very good thing. It also follows the Odyssey drop formula of there being randomized gear drops from enemies, ranging from common to epic, and then legendary gear inside larger ornate chests. One of my favorite things, though, is that you can now mix and match different parts of your weapons to totally customize the look of them, with the blade, the guard, and the handle usually being the different pieces you can change out, which of course gets a shout out from another Ubisoft powerhouse, For Honor, and by God, I'm happy to see this system make its way into this game because I love it. The next system that we should talk about is the home base building, which is as customizable as ever. You get a forge, a dojo, a tea ceremony room, and a few other places to store all the fun collectible items and show off weapons you've collected on your journey, which not only can you change the walls and roof of each building, but you can even change the gravel walkways to each room. And I know this all might be a little much, but I think if you do care a lot about making your home base with your own personal touches, then you can do a lot of work with this system. The combat in Shadows might be my favorite of the RPG era, with the core combat focus being on parrying, making enemies vulnerable, and overall a larger focus on offense. Yes, you can still block, but you are heavily rewarded for counterattacking and finding weak points, and weaving your abilities in with basic attacks to make the most of your damage. The weapons themselves also have a decent variety, with Yasuke having 3 melee and 2 ranged weapons, and then Naoe having 3 melee weapons, as well as a range of tools with shurikens, kunai, smoke bombs, and bells. While I do find it hilarious that you can just use a musket as Yasuke, I do appreciate that Yasuke has a little bit more weapon choice, as it adds to him being a more combat-focused master of the battlefield, especially when a lot of his side activities are based around that mastery of weaponry, which I will touch on more later. Naoe does have less weapons, but more agility and ways to sneak around and be, well, a shadow in the background. And I think this is by far the best the Assassin playstyle has ever felt, and I think a large part of that is due to Naoe's animations, flipping up and down terrain, which plays right into the Assassin power fantasy. Other additions to stealth include being able to now crawl around on the ground in short grass using prone, actual lighting being able to be used to your advantage with enemies having less of a chance to see you when you hide in the shadows, and also having your weapons actually play a role in how you take down a base, which I cannot say enough good things about as we delve into the perk system. The perk slash mastery system is a bit complicated, but once you actually start to piece it together, it does make sense. So it's split up into two ways. The first being the actual skills you can equip, and then your knowledge level. You get skill points from leveling up and finishing quests, but you get knowledge by actually doing activities around the map, such as praying at shrines and temples, doing kuchikiri with Naoe, and doing kata or archery competitions with Yasuke. And I think this is a really cool way to integrate the world into the leveling system. By completing these activities around the world, which quite literally do contribute to your knowledge of your arsenal and yourself, you contribute to your own knowledge and how far you can level up, which I think is great. All the activities feel fun to do, and it doesn't feel out of place in the world at all. However, one huge part of the perk system, especially for Naue, is that in your assassin tree, you can actually change how you can assassinate people based on what weapons you have equipped. Do you have your Kurisigama equipped? You can use it to rush assassinate a target. Have a Tanto? You can pair it with your Hidden Blade to do a double assassination, which, by the way, is the first time this has been back since Syndicate, and I think this system is awesome. It just adds that little bit of detail to the way you have to think about using your character, and I could not be happier that they thought about this. Which, while we are here, the world I do not have enough good things to say about. The entire game is beautiful anywhere you look. Shadows also introduces a weather pattern system that makes the actual seasons in the game rotate every few hours, which keeps things looking different every time you travel throughout the country, and the country itself is just so pretty to look at. From the forest-covered mountaintops to looking across the lake, I don't think there was a single time I was disappointed by the view. And the fact that you can look at the same view and see it covered in snow or cherry blossom leaves makes the whole game feel even more special. They also did a much better job in this game in making sure that every zone was both populated with areas for the players to explore and having quests and side content to do in every area. While some of the side quests are more annoying than others, such as hunting down wandering Ronin, but specifically in a single zone, the game was not lacking in content to keep you occupied, and a lot of the content felt good to engage with. There are also choices you can make for quests and dialogue in this game, and they felt fine. Some of them had good impact, some less so. It was implemented adequately, but it was nothing to write home about. 4 spots around the map, we of course have all of our camps and castles to infiltrate and sneak around in, where you can loot chests and take down commanders. You have Kujikiri points for Naoe and Kata points for Yasuke, which we touched on earlier. And you also have hidden trails and coffins to find legendary gear, which were fun to explore and had more depth to them than Valhalla, which I really appreciate. There are also a lot of small things you can do, like wildlife you can paint and local dishes you can collect, which really bring the setting to life. However, touching on exploration, the eagle is now officially gone, so now we get the full return to the tried and true eagle vision, which only Naue can use, and I am okay with that. Using eagle vision, you can look through walls and also use the observe function, which both Yasuke and Naue can use, to mark enemies, daimyo, treasure, and other points of interest that might be useful to know. There is also an ally mechanic, which is fine. I didn't really use it too much, and most of the quests to get these allies are fine, but some of them are romance options, and the romance options in this game compared to games like Odyssey or even Valhalla are incredibly subpar. There's only like 1 good ally romance for Naue and 2 good ones for Yasuke, which is really only 1 because one of the ones for Yasuke is not an ally you can recruit. Honestly, most of the dialogue between the side characters and the main characters is pretty bad, which is even more disappointing because I really like how they wrote the stories for Naue and Yasuke, and some of the quest dialogue and intrigue is really quite interesting, so I'm not sure why or how they dropped the ball so much here, but they definitely did. Building off the bones of Mirage's investigation board is Shadows' target board. Now, this system I love in concept. The idea behind having all your targets as your objectives for quests and having multiple different groups highlighted on the target board is an idea I can really get behind. However, and unfortunately this is a big however, I feel like it was implemented poorly in this game. Don't get me wrong, I do love the idea of being able to see how many people you need to wipe off the face of the earth and your progress in completing that goal, but I think the larger the target board gets, and it does get large, it becomes really messy. And that makes it a lot harder to follow what you're doing as the game progresses, especially when there are some small factions of bandits and rogue traders that have their own circles, but because they don't connect to the main Shumbakufu of that zone in any way, they kind of make themselves feel a little out of place, and it feels like you lose your focus on why they should be disposed. I want them to try this idea again because I think they are close to making it work great, but unfortunately right now it really misses the mark. Another unfortunate letdown of Shadows is that once again, there are no death cutscenes. You do have the consolation prize of there being a kinda sick white and red color filter that gets applied whenever you kill someone important, but I think I speak for everyone when I say I would have rather had the death cutscenes. I will also definitely point out that one of my actual disappointments of this game was the UI. Now, I know that might sound like a really weird thing to complain about, but when I look at this UI and the game that it is in, it feels like it's very disconnected. There is nothing about it that screams to me that it is part of the setting of feudal Japan. It's incredibly clean and easy to read, which is great, but there's no personality to it that would tell me that it belongs to this game. Even the text feels like they just picked something that has no personality, just something generic, and I think they could have done a little bit better with that. The UI elements for the mastery screen are well done, but the rest is just bland. The story starts off very strong, with Diogo being sold to Oda Nobunaga by Portuguese missionaries and becoming his most trusted retainer, Yasuke, who feels like he owes his new life to Oda. Oda then uses his forces and Yasuke himself to invade Naoi's homeland of the Iga Iki. After Oda invades Iga and basically burns it to the ground, the Shinbaku, who are the Order of the Ancients of this region and are actually being influenced by the outside Templar forces, use this as an opportunity to steal a treasure box from Naoi's father Nagato, who has been protecting it. And also just completely destroy him because it's like a 13 versus 1. Naoi swears to get revenge on every last member of the Shinbaku for her father and hunt them all down. In this process, she meets Yasuke since she was tricked into believing Oda was the leader of the Shinbaku. And Yasuke helps her on her journey of revenge, as well as to free Japan from their grasp. My only complaint to this story is that it was absolutely cut short to make room for the DLC, but besides that, it was honestly pretty good in my opinion. Also, side note, but the introduction of the Shinbaku is absolutely sick. I love it so much. Naoi can feel a little flat sometimes, especially in her English localization, which is disappointing because I don't think her story is bad, but I think her writing and tone could have been better. While she is still much better than a monotone brooding Eivor, I feel like there was more that could have been done with her character that was not fully explored. Yasuke, on the other hand, does a great job at contrasting her, with Yasuke also having a bond and sense of duty to help Naoi, since it was an assassin who helped save his life from the Templars originally. He acts as a more wise counsel to Naoi, helping steer her decisions on how to get her revenge, and I think their dynamic together honestly works really well. There is one aspect of this game that I am a little sad about though, and that's the fact that there is a part of the basic DNA of the Assassin's Creed lore missing, which is the Isu. There is not a single mention of the Isu or any precursor artifacts in this game at all. Even the modern day story is barely mentioned, save for a couple lone appearances by Erudito, and while the modern day story already kinda took a turn for the absolute worst in Valhalla in my opinion, for it to not even make an appearance of any kind is a bit sad. Even though the writing was on the wall, it'll still be missed. Shadows so far only has one official DLC, the Claws of Awaji. But before I dive into that, I want to talk about some post-launch story quests and some DLC that are really just some throwaway quests, but there's enough of them that I want to talk about them anyways. For those unaware of what I'm talking about the collaboration quests, where Shadows has some tie-in / collaboration content with other brands. Why does this exist? Great question. Are these any good? Well, for the story quests, the Tales of Louis Fra was about a 50-minute excursion to help gather some notes and save them from some bandits. The Puzzlement is a comic relief bit, which for some reason also houses our only reference to an Isu artifact. However, we also get a statue of the goat Cassandra and some Isu weapons, so that's something I guess. And then there was a Rift mission, which is a continuation of part of the main game about how we are in the Animus, and I guess the Animus is fighting back? I don't even know how to break this one down, honestly. But the story missions in general were fine, not great, but they could have been worse. For the collaboration quests, we have a critical encounter, which was a good tie into the main story, where Rufino, which is voiced by Critical Role's Robbie Damon, comes seeking help to take down a new influx of Templars who are trying to kill innocents in Japan. Visions of the Realm is a collaboration with Dead by Daylight, where a village has mysteriously been wiped out. You travel there and find a cursed artifact, which teleports you into a demon realm or something, where you are hunted by an Oni. Don't ask questions, you won't like the answers you get. Beyond the Wall is a collaboration with Attack on Titan, and that's all I think I need to say about that. There is also new content in the form of corrupted castles, but these are mainly ways to help replace some castles throughout the game for more rewards and do not count towards any story content or completion, so for my purposes, they will not count towards 100% completion. Moving on to the actual DLC, Claws of Awaji, which introduces a new weapon for Naue in the form of a bow staff and side-scroller missions. It is actually only the first mission, which acts as a prologue into the DLC as a narration of a puppet show you're watching, but honestly, I don't hate this. It's a creative way to give us some backstory on the events that happened before the DLC, and it does it decently well. The story of Claws of Awaji takes place right after Naue's main story ends in Shadows, where you are looking for Naue's mother, which brings her search to the island of Awaji. The island has also been taken over by the Lady of the Island Yukari, who, unlike the mainland villains, is a full-blown Templar. With the help of Naue's mother Suyu and an ally from the main game Hattori Hanzo, you work to dismantle Yukari's Templar influence on the island and release it from her claws. The island of Awaji is pretty small in general, but like the rest of the game, it is still beautiful to look at and explore, even when getting ambushed by assassins and traps. There's of course new gear pieces, where Yasuke now gets a sick-ass fisherman outfit, some new Sumi-E, and overall just some nice places and castles to explore, with a story that is pretty good and easy to follow along, and a surprisingly good boss fight for Naue, which I will not spoil, but I will say I was impressed by. There was also one final story update earlier this year with the Black Tides story DLC. Naue and Yasuke cross paths with a pair of elite Templar agents called the Black Cross, who have come to Japan in search of the observatory and to kill Yasuke and Naue both. It was a short but fun little story overall with some nice mocap scenes, and honestly, it was a nice send-off for the game overall. Shadows is an interesting game to me, because while I do think it has some foundational flaws from its predecessors, I do think there was a lot of really good passion that was put into it. There are a lot of systems that I love, and honestly, this combat might be my favorite of the entire series. I think they do a really good job of contrasting Naue and Yasuke in both core gameplay and personality, and honestly, I think they do an amazing job of capturing the feeling of feudal Japan. Now, I think most of the DLC outside of Claws of Awaji and a couple of others is weaker than the rest of the series by a fair margin, but this game has a lot going for it, and I think it's enough to put it at the top of A tier. Shadows took me 83 hours, 21 minutes, and 54 seconds for the main game experience, and then an extra 16 hours, 53 minutes, and 10 seconds for the DLC. And that finally brings us to a total series runtime for all of Assassin's Creed of 775 hours, 23 minutes, and 9 seconds. So, originally I was going to dive into a whole bunch of statistics about the runtime of each era and things like that, but fuck all that nerd shit. I'm just going to throw a whole bunch of numbers on the screen. Just pause if you want to read it. Anyways, I did a bit of a fun challenge for myself actually before I started this whole playthrough, and that was actually doing a prediction of where I thought I would be ranking all these games, which brings us to our first two big underdogs, Mirage and Syndicate, which actually ended up being really enjoyable experiences, which I did not nearly expect to have such a fun time with. And then, of course, for our biggest underdogs comes our biggest disappointments. And while Revelations was slightly underwhelming, I think I am by far the most disappointed in Unity. For a game that had so much potential and was a laughingstock for so many years, I was really hoping for a game that was a little rough around the edges, but something I could get still some decent enjoyment out of, and I just could not quite get that out of Unity, and that was probably the most disappointing thing of all. Looking at these rankings though, I think we now have to ask, were the old games better? To get a more definitive answer, I had to do some math. So for each tier on the list, you get a point. D tier is 1 point, S tier is 5 points. The OG era with rankings of S, A, B, and C had an average ranking of 3.5 or a B+. The Sailing era had an average score of 3.75 or an A-. The City era had an average score of a 3 or a B, since it had both the best and the worst the series had to offer. Which leaves us with the RPG era, which has an average score of 3.4. Or a strong B. So were the old games better? Technically, but not by much. And I think this brings up something that we all need to remember, and that is, at the end of the day, beauty is within the eye of the beholder, and I think there is still a lot of beauty to be found within all of these games, as they all have a lot of great stories and experiences to offer. And at the end of the day, that's what gaming's all about. But fuck Valhalla, Eivor can die in a hole filled with raven shit.